Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution, Michael Jackson, the great murder and set up by the Epstein group. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, we knew it. And the Epstein information just keep on flowing. Let's get right into the content. Salute.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Wednesday. So glad to have you all here. We've got a very busy show for you today because we are going to deep dive with our good friend Ian Carroll, host of the Ian Carroll Show. What are we going to deep dive today?
We're going to talk about Michael Jackson, how he may or may not be implicated in the Epstein files, what we can surmise from what we see in the Epstein files, how we can be pretty sure that he was framed by the people who actually were child abusers. I'm very excited about this. It's MJ Day.
Yeah, it's hard to get excited about child abusers, but it is exciting when someone is vindicated and was telling us all over the years that he was innocent, and the people that were around him were saying he was innocent, but the FBI framing of all of this and the entrapment and the whole process.
Why would they want him?
Try to bring him down.
Why do this, right? And what can we surmise about our favorite famous people and how they may or may not be fished by fishermen for this very effect?
So Ian's going to join us here in a moment. We're going to do a deep dive on all of this. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. But before we do, we want to tell you about our friends over at Bright Core Nutrition, because early onset dementia and Alzheimer's are on the rise. Reports show a 373% increase in diagnosis. That's right, among young people, 30 to 44-year-olds, and 311% increase in 45 to 54-year-olds. So when doctors treat brain diseases, they often focus on medicating the brain itself, addressing symptoms instead of the root cause. And often it all paid non-client endorsement, not a guarantee nor representative of all clients. Smart portfolios are discretionary, managed to
specifically young boys. One case led to a civil settlement, which Jackson later said he wished he had not done. He wished he had fought it in court. Another did lead to a criminal trial, and he was acquitted on all charges. Here was his statement at the time asserting his unequivocal innocence.
I ask all of you to wait and hear the truth before you label or condemn me. Don't treat me like a criminal, because I am innocent. It was a nightmare. A horrifying nightmare. But if this is what I have to endure to prove my innocence, my complete innocence, so be it. Throughout my life, I have only tried to help thousands upon thousands of children to live happy lives. It brings tears to my eyes when I see any child who suffers. I am not guilty of these allegations, but if I am guilty of anything, it is of giving all that I have to give to help children all over the world. It is of loving children of all ages and races. It is of gaining sheer joy from seeing children with their innocent and smiling faces. It is of enjoying through them the childhood that I missed myself.
Okay. I get emotional watching that because I too was raised a Jehovah's Witness. So I have this connection with Michael Jackson about sort of a different type of childhood. So Clayton warns me not to get emotional about it. Now, the press used his friendship with child actor Macaulay Culkin as proof that he was this weirdo who had an inappropriate obsession with young boys. But recently, this clip of Culkin is going viral, where he says that Jackson actually protected him from specifically going to the island.
Never forget that. Michael Jackson saved me from getting on a plane to that tiny island.
All right. Aaron Carter also said something similar. Here he is in 2016. Now recall, he died in 2022, but he laid it out clearly that the FBI and his mother were trying to get him to say something because he was a child and he refused. Watch.
I have to tell you this. Okay. So after I left the party and the next day I smoked weed with Michael, and then I get in the limousine and I leave. I get back to the Sheraton Hotel at Universal over here. There's 4 FBI agents waiting for me in the hotel room. And my mom's there and she's like, tell them what happened. And I'm like, what do you mean tell them what happened? And I sit down with them and they all ask these super sexually exploiting, questions, backsided questions. And I knew that at my age already. And I looked at all four of them and I said, are y'all crazy? I said, what you think I'm going to do? Tell you that Michael did something bad so that we can sue him for money? That's what I told him. I was like, and I looked over at my mom and I was like, are you serious, Mom? I was like, what is going on here? Why are you letting this happen? And she goes, well, I think something happened. I think something. I'm like, really? That man did nothing but be hospitable, kind, loving, giving, everything you can think of.
All right. Well, the person we wanted to talk about this to was Ian Carroll. He's a researcher, independent journalist. He went viral. It's been 2 years now since this 8-minute video about Michael Jackson, connecting him to Diddy and the Diddy trials and Epstein. It was brilliant. And that's why people trust you. So we wanted to bring you in and talk about what you already knew, what the connections you made with Diddy, and now the connections we can make with Epstein. So let's go. Let's do it. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's good to talk to you guys again. And it's wild how Michael Jackson, like these ghosts that they prop up for sort of their propaganda narratives, keep on trying to replay it, because it almost feels like they invested so much in the smear of Michael Jackson that they're trying to just milk it for all it's worth. And fortunately, independent journalists, not just myself, lots of people are kind of digging open these old lies that no longer quite hold the water that they used to carry for these people.
Before we get into all the Epstein pieces of this and how this connects, I just want to say it seems like all of the signals were there for all of us, right? But most people, the mainstream media, they wouldn't pick them up. They were intentionally looking the other way. When you heard from people like Corey Feldman or Macaulay Culkin, and they were saying, no, he was a good person. He was trying to protect us. And no one wanted to hear that, or at least of all the mainstream media. They wanted to go with the angle that was being pushed.
Absolutely. I mean, during that whole era of smears and accusations, the FBI investigated Michael Jackson for 10 years and found no credible evidence. You can read those reports online. You can even read it on Michael Jackson's Wikipedia page. They confiscated all of his hard drives and found absolutely nothing. It really shows you, it's one of the most explicit examples of how the media can create a story out of nothing, and how they can do that in parallel to actual law enforcement investigations that show the direct opposite of what the media is painting. And it also shows, it's a perfect example of how, especially in Hollywood, those sorts of smears and paparazzi and attack narratives always seem to parallel the timeline of someone going against the industry, or someone speaking out about what's really going on behind the scenes, or someone being threatening to the powers that be. And Michael Jackson checked all of those boxes, from his investments in his own music and in Sony at large, to his speech and speaking out, to his power as a pop star. And so it's no coincidence that the timing is a direct one-to-one match of, as Michael Jackson started to speak out and take kind of moves towards his own power and against the industry, and all of a sudden this narrative explodes out of nowhere, largely based on accusations of, let's just say, actors that were at a point in their career where they had everything to gain by working with the industry, and that subsequently gained from the industry just coincidentally, right as they started making all these accusations that everyone else denied, and all the other children like Macaulay Culkin, all the people that didn't need anything from the industry, that had already had their fame or I guess had souls, like the two clips you just played, all of them flatly denied anything of the sort, and no evidence was ever able to be obtained. But that didn't stop the media from just running the narrative.
Now, I think one of the things that I learned from your video 2 years ago that I did not know, and I think that this is a linchpin on cui bono, who benefits from his death, is that his revised will was notarized in Los Angeles on a day that his family could prove that he was not in Los Angeles. He was in New York, and his estate was then willed over to a person he had already fired and accused of stealing from him. And then all of a sudden, why did this stand? And can you explain who benefited from his death, which is why we're thinking it was so mysterious? And then we'll back up into the accusations as well and the various. I want to touch on Oprah. I want to go there. I want to go on all of it. So let's just start with like, they did steal from him.
Yeah. So it's no secret that Michael Jackson started speaking out about the Jewish producers in the industry and sort of a cabal or was exploiting people and robbing him. And he specifically talked a lot about John Branca, and that's the man that he fired and accused of stealing from him, then mysteriously popped up in a revised will right before he died. And that whole story you just said totally checks out. The family called them out on it, and later the story sort of was revised to say, oh no, it was a mistake. We just it was misremembered where the will was signed, which is, pretty transparent. But cui bono is always a follow the money. It's always follow the paper trail, whether it's assets, whether it's actually cash, or whether it's power and influence. And Michael Jackson had all three. And so in some ways, his death, which I more and more suspect was a murder, not a death, every day. It not only is about what he was saying and what he was speaking out about, which was damaging, but it was also about the actual assets and power that he was accumulating on paper. And when you follow that trail, in Michael Jackson's case, cui bono was John Branca and his associates, Sony, the record industry at large. And when you follow that trail in Diddy or in other, music industry scandals, it tends to be a similar story. And when you follow that in Epstein, when you follow that in Hollywood in general, it always kind of traces back to the managers and controllers of the various industries, which tends to trace back to the money, the big money, and ultimately to bankers. Bankers and people that pull the strings.
Right. Can I tell you a story?
Cabal for sure. Yeah.
I want to tell my Sony story.
Your Sony story?
Because, okay, so in 2011, I left CBS and I was an independent journalist, and I was hired by Sony to do what's called a media tour. Michael Jackson had just died within the last year or two, and they wanted to re-release his catalog because what I didn't understand until your story is that he still had the rights funneling to certain places. They now had full control, and they needed to re-release that music so that they were getting all royalties from his estate. And so they hired me as an independent journalist to do what's called a media tour. So I sat in a dark room and I would just go local station to local station across the country and talk about this re-released Michael Jackson collection. Why they needed to do it, I didn't understand. I was paid, for the day, just a day's work of being a journalist and talking about how great it is that they have this new Michael Jackson collection. And now I realize that I was paid by these people who needed to relaunch his music for their own benefit. Strangely enough, when I was doing this, I was in a dark room. There was no one in there. There was, behind the room was a control room, but I was alone. And as I was doing this, equipment started falling off the shelf where no one, and I was strapped in to it was so weird. And I was like, what is this? And now, look, I'm getting goosebumps. It feels like I didn't know, right? I wouldn't take that job now. But it's an interesting story anyway, it's
very instructional about how the industry works.
Yes.
Too,
yeah.
Where the industry is full of good people. And I mean, I'm saying like the industry, I mean, all industries, all of these industries that are mechanisms of control, they're largely staffed by regular people, good people. Most journalists are genuinely good people trying to do their job. But it's so easy when the information flow is controlled, when the narrative is skewed, when the command structure is sort of segmented in a way where you're just clocking into work to do your little piece. And it's like, yeah, you would think you're supporting Michael Jackson by talking about his memory and his legacy. But then, subtly behind the scenes, the story can come out. And it actually makes me think about Taylor Swift, who sort of used a similar strategy in her split with Big Machine and Scooter Braun and all of that. Everyone can have their own opinions about that, but a similar strategy to re-release music to sort of alter and control royalties and rights. I almost wonder how much she knows about the Michael Jackson story and what she learned from history in that regard.
I'm sick about it now, looking back, but I didn't know.
Let's talk about Epstein. And what do we now know from these documents? And what do we know from the breadcrumbs that had been laid over the years? We can start to unpack this. I mean, it's pretty damning to hear from like Macaulay Culkin about being protected of going to Epstein Island. I mean, to see these connections of these children, I mean, he's just one example, and maybe there's hundreds of examples, and definitely knew what was going on. He wasn't very social. He kept to himself in a lot of ways, but he was very aware of being plugged in about what was happening to these children, and people like Corey Feldman were pretty outspoken about it. So maybe we can just start to pull the threads on Epstein and what Michael Jackson knew about him.
Absolutely. Inherently, this conversation is largely speculative because there's not a lot of physical hard evidence of these things. There's witness testimony, for example, like the two clips we saw earlier, but a lot of this, which is very important to do, I think, in the modern journalistic space, is sort of contextualizing what we do know for sure, and then putting yourself in these various people's shoes and thinking what logically follows from this setup with these players and this world that we live in, because that will show us where to look. That will show us what to investigate. That'll show us where the next clues might be. And it's no secret that Hollywood is a world of gossip. Hollywood is a world of if you know, and who you know is how you get where you're going. And so you have to think about if there's this whole world that has an entire industry built around children, child actors, pageants, all these things that are involving children in largely compromised situations already in terms of their legal rights, in terms of their guardianships, in terms of their custody. And we know now very well that there's a lot of trafficking happening. There's a lot of abuse happening. There's multiple different studios that were doing, let's just say, questionable things. Nickelodeon comes to mind. Then that means that in that industry, there's a lot of children that have a lot of messed up stories. But you know anything about working with children, especially children with trauma or abuse, you know that they are often very scared or reticent to share said stories. They're often, they don't have the context to know who they can trust and who they can't. And if most of the men or adults in general that they know are either abusers or seem to be a part of an abusive structure, you have to imagine that a lot of them would be very guarded about those stories. And even in many cases, it seems like their parents tend to be at least in some way complicit with these sorts of things. And so my mind immediately goes to, well, who would they share with? And it doesn't seem like a far-fetched idea to say that they would share with the one adult that seems truly loving and caring and that like creates a safe space for them. And Michael sits in this really unique position in the industry where he was both a child star that came up in the industry and had a whole lifelong career in the industry and was so famous that he had access to everybody, to everywhere, from royalty all the way down. And he also made a point of, intentionally socializing with his fans and intentionally trying to like kind of retain that base humanity. And then he also develops this interest in protecting children and in creating Neverland Ranch, which got smeared obviously as being like an abusive thing. But when you actually rewind the narrative and think critically about the facts that have come out, and you actually take him a little more at his word, it starts to paint a picture of a man that would have been actually the exact kind of person that these children would have confided in, the exact kind of person that these children would have seen an ally in, and that could have understood what they were going through because he went through it too. And so it actually becomes no mystery in my mind that Michael Jackson would be the exact kind of person that would hear all these rumors and that would be able to put the story together in the background before and more than just about anyone else. So it's a story that has very little physical documentation, and unfortunately, Michael is gone. But
Same
all
people
of
Mike
the
up,
associated like pieces of evidence to suggest
Miriam
that
stole
are
his
right there.
Rich.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I always said this, bro. It's impossible for Michael Jackson to ever been broke. Remember, these people know what assets is. At the time of his death, at the time of his murder, his assassination, he owned the rights to the Beatles catalog. He owned half of Sony. That's one thing. They cannot justify, how can I be broke when I own half of your whole empire? I own the Beatles catalog. But they told that man he was broke. So he had to go back on that road, and they set him up to kill him.
Can I just follow up with this because of talking about like the physical evidence or like the documented evidence? Maybe there is. And among the 3 million documents we don't have, or the black holes that we don't have, and you hear, of course, from
the NOI did not protect him. They just got close to him, put that motherfucking security guard in there that was overlooked his murder. The next thing you know, that's PD, the security guard. They're going to talk about that too, because a lot of people not fucking stupid. Michael Jackson thought Farrakhan and them would protect him and funneled a lot of money to the Nation of motherfucking Islam. Pac thought that too, and Biggie thought that too. A lot of people thought that. Anyway, I ain't even going to get into that. But Michael Jackson thought that some of his people would protect him. And Jesse, all of these leaders, black leaders, River Al, Mike went to all of them, tried to get help. And they let these motherfuckers kill him and take his motherfucking catalog. That's a fact. While all of them made money, because Mike gave a lot of money out, they let those people do this to Michael Jackson. The congressional black bootlickers.
In like what we played at the very beginning about FBI agents specifically being sent in order to, and perhaps try to get these, interviews with witnesses and putting all of this documentation together, trying to build a case against him. Maybe it does exist at least on the FBI side, and we haven't seen it yet. What do you make of that FBI move to really try to pigeonhole him over that 10 years specifically? There's got to be a voluminous amount somewhere.
Well, where my brain, I think you're absolutely right. Like, it is no coincidence that we were told there was a lot more files than we have now been provided with and told that's all of them. But my mind immediately goes back to the founding of the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover and his blackmail, specifically the blackmail that the mob had on J. Edgar Hoover, compromising photos of him, at the very least with his assistant Clyde Tolson, and very likely voluminous more based upon what we know about the Blue Suite parties that were being used to collect blackmail at that time, cross-dressing, gay orgies, etc., with lots of powerful people. And J. Edgar Hoover was right at the center and heart of that. And J. Edgar Hoover served as the director of the FBI for 49 years, both when it was the Bureau of Intelligence and then when it was rebranded as the Federal Bureau of Intelligence.
Right.
And so that blackmailing, to me, that represents rot at the core. And that's a direct partnership with the mob. And the mob is very infused into the music industry. In many ways, the mob founded the music industry and has been using it for money laundering for untold decades. And so it's really just like, those are two parties that are directly beside each other in many ways. And I cannot help but wonder what types of influences or communications incited those FBI investigations, and what the real, like, it seems hard to imagine that they weren't investigations that were explicitly asked for and intended to accumulate evidence on behalf of Michael Jackson's enemies, essentially.
Right. Entrapment in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think of the people that we know that surrounded him, he had to have, it would have been very useful for them to entrap him in something like this, whether he had a proclivity for this or not. It's clear that they pushed this on a lot of people for useful blackmail or leverage or what have you. So, Oprah has said many times that she was good friends with Michael Jackson, and she impugned him in interviews and then said nothing about John of God, who is allegedly, a sexual abuser. She was totally fine with that. It does seem to me, now there was a story about his sister LaToya indicating that he was an abuser of children, and then later backing that up and saying that she was under duress. Didn't she say it in Israel? She gave a press conference in Israel, I believe. I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah, I'm not sure where it was.
And then later retracted it. Let me look into that while you respond to that. But this idea that he had to have a peripheral vision of this abuse because so many people that were close to him have very suspicious connections.
Yeah, you bring up such an important point that in these industries, it seems, it's pretty well evidenced that it's not just that the people that are already sickos get entrapped in blackmail. It seems very clear, the Diddy story really highlights this, that they purposefully attempt to dangle every possible vice and proclivity in front of you, every possible sin in front of you, just to sort of fish for any potential road into blackmailability. Because the thing that was the most instructive for me in digging into the Diddy story, the entire his entire life and the evolution of his blackmail scheme, or at least what looks an awful lot like a blackmail scheme, is that there's two types of artists. There's artists that are good and there's artists that suck. And Diddy had a penchant for artists that suck. And I suspect, my interpretation of it based upon the evidence, is that the industry realized over time that it's a lot easier to control artists that suck. Because nowadays you can make any artist a star. If you control the Billboard Top 100, you control the hits, you control the radio stations, you control the concerts and the tours. Like collectively, the industry controls basically whose music hits the top. And they have the producers and they have the writers. And so really, it's not hard to stand up just some pretty person on the stage and turn them into a star. When you do that with someone that has no talent, you have complete control over them. They are nothing without you. And if you cut them off, they go right back to the streets they came from. And that alone is powerful enough incentive to control most people completely. And then probably to entrap them into more and to give them the lifestyle and the drugs and the girls and the parties and all that.
Yeah.
The problem comes when you have an artist that's actually good. Because an artist that's actually good doesn't need any of that. An artist that's actually good can succeed on their own. They could even go independent. They can buy their own music back. And so it's the artists that are actually good that start to have these stories emerge of attempted control and leverage. And Michael Jackson's the perfect example. Justin Bieber is another very good example. Taylor Swift is a complicated example because her dad was a banker. And so there's some complicated savvy involved on all sides of that equation. But when you look at the various stars that truly have talent and star power, that's where you start to see really unique storylines. And when you look at the Diddy blackmail kind of networks, you see a whole bunch of talentless nobodies, so to speak, that were made stars because they're actually much easier for the music industry to sort of milk for all they're worth and control down to like every fiber of their existence. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I did go back. So the LaToya piece is really strange because she did give a press conference in Tel Aviv in 1993.
Shocker.
Saying, yes, my brother does have these proclivities. He is a pedophile. She later retracted it and said, I was under duress. I had an abusive marriage. Her husband was Jack Gordon, who is a music industry insider, major music producer. And she has said, why would she do that
Under
in
duress.
Israel?
What does duress actually mean?
Why there? Why couldn't she give that here? So that's an interesting piece. And I don't know exactly why she did that in Israel, but you're right. You know, it makes sense to assign these people handlers, right? And so that you control them. And Michael Jackson seemed to be incorruptible in that way, at least. That's our assertion.
The conversation about handlers is so important and so relevant. It's very complicated, and it feels very like Hollywood James Bondy. It feels almost unbelievable. It's hard to unpack it and accept it if you're just a regular person trying to go about your life. But more and more and more, we get really hard, concrete evidence of it happening again and again and again in the music industry, in Hollywood, in politics, all around. And one of the most famous and initially and like earliest examples that was extremely concrete, at least in my lifetime, was around Kanye West and his personal trainer, Harley Pasternak, who Kanye posted a text message that he received that is now infamous about how Harley Pasternak was threatening to send him back to La La Land and to drug him up and to make sure he never saw his kids again unless he started playing ball and not being, anti-Semitic and all these things. That the publication of that text message was so important for the disclosure of this conversation. But you bring up another point in the security teams and handlers and security teams, because when you look at Michael Jackson, there's this thread of his security team. His head of security was a man named Bill that was like a father figure to him, that was with him for his entire life. And there's all sorts of photos of Michael with Bill. There's a letter that Michael wrote to Bill thanking him when Bill finally had to retire deep into his 70s, just being like, "You were the father I never had. I love you deeply. Thank you so much for the crazy ride. I don't know what I would have become without you." The moment that this man, Bill, retires, because he's getting really old, Michael Jackson starts cycling through different security teams. And it's only like a year and a half later that he winds up with Fahim Muhammad as his head of security and then mysteriously dies. And Fahim Muhammad is second on the scene to that death, that tragic death, and then immediately goes and gets hired as Diddy's head of security. And this man is just a couple years out of college with a business and marketing or real estate degree. I forget the specifics. Nothing related to security. He was like a 21 or 22-year-old kid. It's a little unclear exactly how old he was, but somehow he becomes the head of security for the king of pop, and then immediately becomes the head of security for Diddy, who we find out is running a giant like trafficking ring. And so that's like, oh, well, that is really sketchy. And then, I mean, my brain could go a million directions, but the last point I'll connect is Charlie Kirk. And right now, a lot of people have questions about Charlie Kirk's security team and what exactly was going on with them. And more, I'll just say, let's just say that people in our industry, in the journalism industry, that are very connected and in the know, more and more are kind of talking and whispering about that security teams are one of the most common ways that you get handled. They're one of the most common ways that you get surrounded by, let's just say, malign forces, because they inherently are people that are trained in violence, that need to have access to your every move, that need to know everything about your schedule. They need to know everything about what you're doing. And often they're people that you don't actually know who hired them. And usually before you hired them, they were in some sort of military or violent career path, where they made who knows what kinds of friends with who knows what kinds of allegiances with, who knows what kind of morals. So I just wanted to bring up that security team thread and highlight it. Well, and it's so dirty. And you brought up like the trafficking ring for Fahim Muhammad, who then finds himself like in Michael Jackson's orbit there right at the end. Like, who else, can you possibly put in place if you're trying to build a narrative around him being like a pedophile and a child trafficker or whatever else? You put a guy who
put Fahim Muhammad there. Michael Jackson hired the Nation of Islam to be his security because he got spooked about the small hats and all that. He was listening to Farrakhan, telling some truth. He was trying to look out for his people. So he said, you know what? I'm going to hire black security. That's what people always try to overlook. Mike said, he was paying them millions of dollars. So who put Fahim Muhammad next to Michael motherfucking Jackson? Come on, bro.
He is maybe involved with child trafficking. And of course, you and I know we've talked before about this, but of course, he bought land, Fahim Muhammad did, like right on the border, with the border fence right on his backside, where we just bought this land because it was cheap and really, but then the kids are riding. I like to bring my kids out here to ride ATV.
Michael Jackson, listen to, see, all skin folk and kinfolk. Michael Jackson thinking the black power, get him Conway, get him a black doctor. Get the black man. I'm black, y'all. He got black security. He got a black doctor. And they used them to kill the king of pop. That's a motherfucking fact. Boule house niggas, they was in on it. Mike trying to look out for his people. Let them make the millions. And look what happened.
These and it's like, no, they don't.
In the junk,
they did an interview with the local news station, and the border wall is right there in the back of the like interview, And anyone that knows anything about the border wall around Tijuana is like, no, there's people hopping over that fence all the time. That's not a place where you go and like send your kids to camp to just like hang out. Obviously there's something going on there. It's like, you don't just have a dude that's associated with Diddy's trafficking ring randomly buying, you know, hundreds or even thousands of acres of land right on the border wall outside of San Diego. That's not how it works.
And you know, the Epstein part of this, of course, with the flow, and you're a billionaire, you're tapped into these networks of child trafficking. So they're flowing to you at Zorro Ranch. They're being brought out of Turkey at spas. They're being basically groomed in order to be the great masseuse, flying into Zorro Ranch. So there's this entire network around Epstein that was working on his behalf. And then you have this like mysterious, well, the murder of Michael Jackson, let's just call it what it is. And in the like right around that death, right around his death, he has this mysterious phone call where he basically says, you know, they want to get rid of me. They want to get rid of me. And it seemed we weren't really hearing from Michael at that time. That we knew about this comeback tour was about to happen, that this is it. It was all about to come back. He was obviously rehearsing like crazy. They made a film about it, which we've watched like 80 times in our family.
I watch it every time I get sick.
That's
like how my family knows I'm not feeling well, is I'm in a dark room watching This Is It in tears.
Yeah. And
that's
so
my hobby.
Ready to do this massive world tour again, but we really hadn't heard about him. We heard about the tour, but then he's really concerned at the end that they are trying to get me. And we have that phone call where he's openly admitting that they're coming for me. And then suddenly he's murdered. Maybe you can pull the thread and pieces there at the end.
My brain hasn't gone here before, but the way you just sort of recalled the story immediately made me think about Charlie Kirk. I hate to say it again, but once again, you have a person in this position of power that's got a lot of, let's say, control networks around them, that's getting ready for, you know.
They lied to Mike, told Mike he was broke. It's impossible for Michael Jackson ever to have been broke, even if he had assets. The most important thing, these people know they don't give a fuck about no cash. It's always about assets. He owned the Beatles catalog. That was worth $800 million. He owned half of Sony. Sony had all those rappers, all those top selling artists was up under Sony. Mike owned half of their shit. But they told Mike he was broke. That is the first red flag. He wasn't broke. They just needed him to get on the road. Knew he wasn't going to be able to do all those shows in his 50s like that. That's when Conway Murray and all that said he put these people next to him that was going to kill him. Never needed to go on no road. Never needed to do no shows. Never was broke.
You know, the tour that's sort of changing their stances or not being hurt, you know, things are happening. And then we get communications from right before they die saying they're going to get rid of me. They're going to kill me, you know? I think a little bit, you have to put yourself in their shoes where suppose you're a famous person like a Charlie Kirk or a Michael Jackson or any of these people, and you are starting to wake up to some really dark stuff in your industry, in your world, and you have direct insider knowledge of it. You're suddenly in a very complicated position because it's not as simple always as just coming out and saying it, because you know, Michael Jackson, for example, knew intimately how effective the smear machine is at taking your words, twisting them, attacking you, discrediting you, doing whatever to you. But it's also not as, you know, so like, how do you come out with the truth? And then also, if you're even going to consider coming out with the truth and you let anybody in your orbit know what you know and what you plan to do about that, how do you know who to trust? And how do you know that they won't kill you for exposing them?
Especially having a new security detail.
Exactly. Right. And so it's like, where do you turn? How do you proceed with that? Who do you even talk to? Suddenly it's a very paranoid line of thinking. And it becomes no mystery why we get these weird sort of cryptic communications or secret communications, or in Charlie's case, very direct communications that were just, you know, in private text messages right before they wind up getting killed, because you'd have to imagine there would be signs there. You have to imagine that there would be, you know, weird conversations, weird, subtle things you might pick up on. And the thing about human trafficking and child trafficking is you can't help but look at, like, if you're trying to expose that and it knows about it, you inherently know the deepest level of evil. These people are capable of doing the most evil deeds in the world, the most evil deeds imaginable, to the most innocent people on the planet. And so they are inherently the most capable of violence of any criminal organization on the planet. And so if you're going to expose drug cartels, we all know that drug cartels are very capable of violence, but like human traffickers inherently even more so. And so it becomes a really tied up thought process when you put yourself in the shoes of someone like Michael Jackson and you try to think, how would you even speak about that? How would you even come out with that? And then you start to, I mean, my mind immediately wanders to sort of the like urban legend or the conspiracy theories. There's some evidence to back it up that various other strange deaths in the music industry, like Chester Bennington, Chris Cornell, Anthony Bourdain. There's a lot of rumors about a documentary exposing child trafficking that was being worked on right before a lot of these men died, strange deaths. And I haven't ever really seen convincing evidence to sort of put that story into concrete or to bed. But it starts to be the same thought process of how do you actually expose this? You need evidence, you need corroboration, you need documentation. But the problem is in collecting all of that, you expose yourself massively. And I think the Epstein files, if they show us anything, it's that this is not an isolated small criminal faction. This is actually the organizational structure of our world. This is the primary organizational structure behind our government. This is the intelligence agency networks. This is organized crime networks. It's all tied together. And so by going after one node of it, you're going after the entire network. And there's kind of no limitations on what they can and will do to protect themselves, is what it looks like to me.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, think about Sound of Freedom, right? As the massive, we're doing interviews before that movie launched, and boy, the smear campaigns began in earnest. And it was a concerted effort to try to shut down theaters, to go after the, Jim Caviezel once again, Tim Ballard, to go after all the infrastructure around that movie exposing child trafficking. And they did a good job. They really tried
to attempt to discredit everyone involved and to try to flip the narrative on them that they're actually traffickers themselves, that it's actually a psyop it's like what. And then after it had come out and people like us were all talking about its reception, that was actually the first time, because I was pretty new to the media at that point. I was new on TikTok. That was the first time I got a concerted attack from multiple angles, multiple creators, like multiple different pieces all coming after me. That was kind of wild. And I think some of it's probably just partisanship, but it's a lot of these smear campaigns, a lot of these propaganda campaigns to try to like silence things and shut things down and create infighting. Often they're cleverly designed, kind of COINTELPRO style, to have bad actors in the mix that are starting the allegations, like against Michael Jackson, like he was a pedophile. But then it's designed in a way that it gets other people to jump on the bandwagon, and you get other voices, genuine voices, be they independent media or independent, or like just journalists or regular humans out there in the world, start to believe the story and parrot the story and jump in on that bandwagon narrative. So it becomes very complicated to decipher what's true and what's not in any of these sort of stories that are an attack vector, or stories that are a potential exposure of a piece of this bigger narrative. Also,
the silence is pretty deafening too. People like Laura Loomer, Mark, when Epstein documents come out, this massive story, total silence, right? So silence is deafening from the mainstream media. Ben Shapiro. Yeah. Where are you at? Where are you at with like the largest story in the world right now, with this massive international tentacles, this deep state supra government that's over all of it, all of these tentacles into the government and Mossad and the CIA and MI6. You're totally quiet about it. You're not even talking about it. And Fox News, mainstream media, totally silent on it as well. So there's a lot to be seen in the silence.
Those influencers are very busy talking about the people they truly care about, which is the citizens of Iran. They're very busy advocating for the rights of the regular citizens of Iran who are being killed by their fascist dictator government, which, I'm being facetious and sarcastic, because obviously those commentators care nothing for the citizens of Iran if they can't even bring themselves to care for the children of their own nation, America, being raped and abused like this. And so it's like, you're so right to point out the silence and these moments where narratives shatter, these moments where document sets like this come out, where these hard truths are being exposed, that around and see who's distracting from it, who's obfuscating it, who is misconstruing it intentionally, obviously, and who's silent about it. Because those are the people that are on the wrong team. Whether that's intentionally and knowingly complicit, or whether that's just bad interests, misaligned interests, whether their sponsors don't want them talking about it, whatever it is, anyone right now that is trying to pretend like we don't know who Epstein worked for, or trying to pretend like he actually worked for the CIA and not Israel, or, you know, any of these obfuscation narratives, or that are just silent about it, that is a pretty sure sign that that person is not a journalist that, at least that I would be trusting ever again.
And running cover for people. Yeah.
There's no story more clear than the giant international sex trafficking cabal that's trafficking children to billionaires on behalf of Israel, trying to control and subvert our nation and all sorts of nations all around the world, trying to implement things like weird genetic and eugenicist sort of transhumanist agendas, weird techno-fascist kind of digital control networks. All of these things are tied into those Epstein files, and have these abusive sort of blackmail structures at the core of how they were functioning. And so there's no story right now that's more clear cut, good and evil, than the Epstein story.
I think a bigger story is the Nancy Guthrie story.
I mean, we probably should devote the rest of our interview to it if you think about it.
Yeah.
No, let's not.
I want to ask you about who do you think in power right now still has an interest to revive the Michael Jackson pedophile story? Because we saw in late 2025, the Department of Justice released Epstein-related photos. Michael Jackson was in it with the faces of children blacked out, and the internet was too quick for them. And they said, these are his own children. So why would they give us this decoy photo? Who still needs this? And what are they diverting us from, do you think?
It's a good question. And I don't know. I don't know how far to run with it, because I did find, actually, when I dug into it, I found that photo, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure of this. I'm pretty sure I found that photo in one of the sleeves of one of the so there's photos of these binders of photos.
Yes.
That were in Epstein's mansion, that the FBI took photos of all the pages, and almost all of them are redacted because of the contents of what was in them. But I believe that photo appears inside of one of those binders, implying that Epstein had it in one of these collections. And so that to me does explain how it wound up sort of in the general collection, but then it got reproduced larger, and not all of those photos did. And it got, let's just say, salaciously redacted in a way that was a little suspicious. And so I don't know whether to run away with that and think that there is maligned interests trying to promote this Michael Jackson narrative as an obfuscation tactic, or to revive the concept that he was a pedophile or anything like that, or whether it's just a funny coincidence and the internet naturally runs away with salacious stories and, like, you know, those big names and such. Regardless, it's backfired, because the internet is more and more developing its truth sense a little bit, where often we'll get things wrong momentarily, but often the collective mind, we're getting experienced enough now that we do a good job of sort of unpacking the truth of a thing, and then actually narratives that are trying to deceive. Often the Streisand effect takes hold, and then the opposite of the deception actually spreads like wildfire. Hence why we're talking now about this and exposing even more to the world that the Michael Jackson pedophile narrative was completely hollow from the start.
Right.
So I don't know if it was intentional or not. I do think that it's easy to run with various things in the files that seem either hyper salacious or hyper incriminating or hyper suspicious. And in many cases they are. But I also think that for all of our sake, everyone that's a viewer that doesn't have the time to really do all the digs for themselves should just, you know, take it slow and pump the brakes on coming to any strong conclusions, because there's a lot of people, you know, pumping out stories for good and, you know, monetary reasons, for all kinds of reasons. And All of these stories deserve the deepest investigation and the deepest exposure, which unfortunately I think is up to us because the FBI seems to be asleep at the wheel.
Suggests to me, because I believe we have concluded that that was a public setting, that Epstein was given access, because he had so much high profile access, and that there probably were a lot of Epstein related characters circling someone like Michael Jackson and others. Yeah. And I'm sure that, it's always a fishing expedition. Let's see how close we can get to this person. Let's see what we can,
and take a photo.
Yeah. Let's see what we can do.
100%.
And so we should not fool ourselves that this is a one-off, that people like that are not constantly surrounded by these nefarious fishermen. That's what this suggests to me. And it's speculative.
And actually, you bring up such a good point, Natalie, in this sort of the gray area of trying to decipher who's a fish being hunted.
Yeah.
Like as in a target of Epstein that was being hunted, and which targets actually crossed the line into being abusers and blackmailed. And to my great chagrin, the most obvious example of this gray area in my mind is Elon Musk. And I don't want the audience to take this as me defending Elon and saying he's a great guy that you should trust, because I don't trust him and I don't think he's a great guy. And I think he's been caught lying about all sorts of ridiculous things, like his rank in video games. Not to mention everything else that's far more important. So I'm not saying trust Elon Musk, but when you actually look at the correspondences with Elon Musk over time, it's very instructive if you read them yourself and you kind of trace Epstein's contact with him over time. It shows you this progression of the fishermen approaching the prey. And obviously there's no larger target than Elon Musk. Elon is like target number one, maybe aside from Donald Trump, except that they already were, very acquainted with Donald Trump in the past. So Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. He runs all these companies. He has all these defense contracts. He's a huge celebrity. And he gets, Epstein starts approaching him about visiting his factories and sort of these professional associations. And then there's a section in there where which Elon lied about, to be clear, where the emails make it apparent that they did a factory tour at, I think, SpaceX. Because the next email after they're trying to coordinate it is, thanks for the tour, that was great. And Jeffrey Epstein drops in a little sort of sexual joke into that follow-up email that sort of implies, at least by my read of it, that before he had met Elon, it was very professional. I'm just a normal billionaire that's just trying to support, Then they spend some time together in person and they probably have some boy talk, and Epstein probably has some cute girls with them. And so he gets a sense for what is this guy's line around the weird stuff. And suddenly he feels comfortable making a little sexual joke. And then later it starts to progress into, oh, you should come to the island. Oh, the ratio is insane. Oh, Tallulah would be uncomfortable at the ratio. Oh, the girls, I wasn't talking about coming to the UN dinner to see diplomats. My party is all young girls. These sorts of emails start to pop up. And then Elon Musk starts to cross a line where he is no longer just yeah, let's try to do something. Yeah, let's meet up. Yeah, let's do a tour. It crosses into, holy shit, it's Christmas morning and I need to go to the wildest party of my life. I don't want to go to a chill island vacation. Give me the raging party. I'm being facetious here.
Yeah.
But that's where then that email comes up. And so you see this progression of the blackmailer getting in and getting a read on the target and then starting to seduce them into, Elon Musk may or may not have known what was really going on. It's unclear. He should have known something was weird. Hopefully in the future, everyone will know that something's weird when a billionaire comes up with a bunch of 17-year-old girls around. But that's where then it's a little gray area, exactly what lines Elon crossed, because we don't have evidence that he ever made it to the island, but we do have evidence that he was desperately trying to go to the island, and Lord knows what he would have done if he had gotten there. But Jeffrey Epstein actually appears to have bailed on him, which is a weird, twisted turn of fates here. But but that whole storyline sort of elucidates that it's kind of a gray area, and it's not always clear how much someone got hooked, and it's not always clear how you should morally feel about them, because just because they did commit a crime doesn't mean that they were always that monster. Just because they didn't commit a crime doesn't mean that they're not that monster. It's all very complicated.
No, I think you're right about that. And, you know, the reason why I think my mind goes to the CIA piece of this whole thing, which is defense contractors. You know, he's one of the largest, you could argue one of the most important CIA assets, so to speak, from that perspective. Maybe the CIA calls up one of their friends, Jeffrey Epstein, and says, "Hey, back off. We need him for other reasons." I don't know. My mind goes to that immediately, but
that's a fair point. The question becomes, would he actually back off, or would he take a different angle, right? Because you can only imagine, like, if you play that out, Mossad and Epstein's direct mentorship was the Promise software scandal. Robert Maxwell, deeply involved in the Promise software scandal, which is one of the earliest, but certainly not the last examples of bugging a software on behalf of Israeli intelligence. And you can only imagine what kinds of things you could get done if you had enough blackmail on Elon Musk to force him to put a bug into some SpaceX software, maybe into some Starlink software. Suddenly, you can start to imagine how powerful blackmailing someone like Elon Musk could be. So I think that's a very wise thing to bring up, that there's probably other intelligence games happening in the background, kind of arm wrestling for authority over what people can and cannot do.
Right. Like, we need him to be somewhat clean here. So back off this.
Because you better believe that the CIA was not running the operation, but you better believe they knew about it. I'm sure the people in the CIA knew about it.
Right.
I want to go back to something Natalie asked, which is about who benefits from these new narratives that are starting to emerge. And one of them popped up. And to me, the easiest play for like a news organization is just to drag up some old story and go back and like re-interview someone from like years ago. Nothing new. But because it's Epstein related, let's just remind people that Michael Jackson is a pedophile. And the New York Post, about 2 weeks ago, and I'll just put this up here on the screen. This was the New York Post story that went kind of viral. And then you have Taj Jackson as the nephew of Michael Jackson coming to the defense and slamming the New York Post. So here was the New York Post headline: Michael Jackson was a pedophile. Like, they just put it right there. Michael Jackson was, quote, a pedophile who could abuse children almost with impunity, claims prosecutor who tried the king of pop.
Well, duh, you were the prosecutor. You already brought that case. We know that you think that. So why this bullshit headline?
Out of the blue. And then here's Taj's response. Taj Jackson: "Are you still using my uncle as a smokescreen, New York Post? We see you. The more the public talks about Epstein, the more you post about Michael Jackson. The public has caught on. I suggest you read the room."
Right now is the time to, especially for older people, especially for anyone sort of 40, 50 and up that grew up in the era where publications seemed or maybe were trustworthy. The mask is fully off now. And that is a perfect example of publications that are just doing the most bad faith journalism you could ever do on one of the most obvious, clean cut, good versus evil cases you could ever have. And it takes zero journalistic capability to read these files and understand what Jeffrey Epstein was, what his network was, what was happening. Not to mention to think like they are publishing a report that is literally just the prosecutor stating his opinion, despite it having not held up in court, and then saying it as though it was a fact, and then covering their ass by saying prosecutor says, right?
And that's why they hate X. This is why they hate X. Because I want to put this. Here's the reader's context note. Didn't mean to cut you off there. Prosecutor readers added context. Prosecutor Zonin's claims are biased due to his role in the trial and remain unproven, despite the fact that Jackson faced one of the largest criminal investigations ever and was cleared of any wrongdoing, while his accusers were found to have major credibility issues. So, the
open source internet, it's completely changed journalism, because no longer can you sort of purchase or control just a few corporations and sort of control the dissemination of information. And you bring up such a good point around Michael Jackson that is directly paralleled by the other narrative that's going around lately. Epstein worked for Russia. And
Yes.
In
that's
fact, one
fun.
of the reporters or one of the experts that they got to write one of these stories that was published that was getting parroted around on all the mainstream media was actually the dude that authored the Steele dossier that was a part of Russiagate that was completely discredited already around Russian accusations. They got that same dude to weigh in as an expert that Epstein worked for Russia.
Did you know that before he wrote the Steele dossier, he had been involved in a made-up story about how Russia was subverting the World Cup, that he had a similar assignment?
The FIFA story?
His whole thing was to prove that Russia had, and then he was hired by the Clinton campaign. They're like, we like what you do and you're blaming Russia. That's your whole gig. Can you do it for us politically?
That
so
is
he
his
did
whole
that.
gig.
That's literally all he does, is come up with a way to blame Russia for shit. And
I
so
wonder what it says on his LinkedIn.
official
because it's still
Russia
happening.
blamer. I'm a framer of Russia. That's what I do. It's Russia, Russia,
And
Russia.
Applebaum
And just to
would love him.
clarify too, what's in the files, because I've looked through them extensively. I've developed an app that lets you AI through them. Like I've been in these files very deeply, and this was obvious before these files came out too. He was targeting Russians. He did have friends in Russia. A lot of his friends in Russia were organized crime figures that were, let's just say, they were organized crime. So they were kind of adversarial to the main, to the government there, but also corruptly involved with them in some ways. He was targeting Putin and Putin's associates. But the level of connection to Russia is very similar to his level of connection to Ivory Coast. In fact, it would be probably more accurate to say that he worked for the Ivory Coast than that he worked for Russia, because in the case of the Ivory Coast, which is a tiny African nation that no American has ever heard of, he actually helped install a dictator in the Ivory Coast. That the Ivory Coast new dictator, his niece was in Epstein's circle flying around with him. They provided weapons to this guy. Him and Ehud Barak had a whole intelligence operation targeting the Ivory Coast with all sorts of contacts. And so the Russia narrative is basically taking one little tiny branch of Epstein's operation where he had connections into one country and sort of inflating it as though that was his like whole network. When you actually look at the files, when you actually read the story, that those branches existed into all sorts of different countries, from Mongolia to Ivory Coast, obviously America, all around the world. And so it's this weird obfuscation game where they think that they can just, tell you a story because they're the mainstream news and we're all going to believe it. But that ship has sailed. And anyone that still is reading the mainstream news for their information, just look at how many of them said Epstein worked for Russia, and then throw that whole publication in the trash and burn it, because clearly there's no journalist that could ever report on this story that had that passed the 7th grade that would ever come to that conclusion at this point with how much evidence we have. And so that leads me to think that if a journalist is publishing a story that says that, either they're still in the 6th grade or they are literally a bad actor that is trying to deceive you.
Right. I want to just bring this back around one more time to Michael Jackson, and then we'll let you go soon. The racial framing of Michael Jackson as he was a self-hating Black man. You have found medical records showing that he actually did have this skin disease. You can see it on his hand in very early childhood photos.
He talked about it openly.
Yeah.
He said, I wish I was Black. I wish I was Black.
But this idea that he was an anti-Semite trumps his work as a Black American. So not only was he not a racial minority because he hated himself and bleached his skin, but he was an anti-Semite, and a lot of his work, his music is dedicated to racial injustice, specifically for Black people. I was just telling my kids the other day, giving them a lecture about how the Rhythm Nation album is about literacy in Black communities. But that narrative is largely buried because they could frame him as an anti-Semite and a self-hating Black person. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, it's one of those narratives they recycle over and over and over because they've learned, and by they, I mean sort of the media cabal, the controlling networks in Hollywood, music industry land, et cetera. They've learned that there's almost no better way to control people's image and narrative than to inflame these culture war identity politics narratives. And in particular, especially in America, we have built up this sort of legacy of caring about the underdog and the underprivileged and the underserved, especially among liberal white women, but really among everybody. And so when you can build someone up as being evil towards a minority, being evil towards an underserved population, being evil towards basically anyone except for children, funny thing, that is a great way to smear someone. I mean, I guess in some ways they do try to flip it and, frame him as being a child molester when it's all their buddies, but they take all these different tactics, not just the anti-Semitism tactic, but they pile other things on as well. And with Michael Jackson, it wasn't just that they were saying that he was a self-hating black man. There was also this whole campaign of calling him Wacko Jacko and calling him like psycho. And the tragic irony is that Wacko Jacko, they framed him as like, that was his nickname, and it was parroted all over all the tabloids, despite him repeatedly saying, "Don't call me that. I hate that." That was actually the name of a monkey from an old cartoon that was like clearly like a racist black reference. So it's like there's just racism in every direction, and they like try to strip him of his race while being racist towards him, while accusing him of being racist towards them themselves. And so it just becomes this pile of slop that is all completely irrelevant to the factual or infactuality of the claims that he was abusing children. And so in my mind, it just becomes a bunch of mud that gets piled on top of the story. And it's not dissimilar right now to when I'm, talking about the Epstein documents and talking about Ehud Barak and Leslie Wexner and all these names associated. And then someone jumps in and just says, you're being anti-Semitic. It's like, well, A, I'm not. And B, that has nothing to do with the argument here. C, you're just obfuscating and calling people names and trying to get people inflamed around these identity politics layers that are not relevant to the actual information layer we're talking about. Stories are true or not true. It's not that stories are like racist or anti-Semitic. They're just what happened, right?
Before we let you go, Ian, I mean, you've been deep diving these documents, as you mentioned, built an app to like go through all of them. And where's the biggest blind spot, do you think, right now for people? What has you most interested?
I think the biggest blind spot for the general public is sort of the deeper layers of the intelligence operation, because I'll just briefly explain what I mean by that, because obviously the abuse of the kids and all the celebrity and wealthy billionaire names, that's taking the highest step on the ladder of what people are paying attention to, because obviously it's salacious. And then there's the next step down, that he actually worked for Israel, and it was an Israeli blackmail operation. For a long time, that was kind of disputed and sort of covered up, I guess. But now that is largely being talked about as well, thankfully. Very important to talk about that. But then when you step beneath that layer into what were all the things that this intelligence network were doing on behalf of Israel, other than just the blackmail of celebrities, that's the layer that is deeply significant to our modern world, that is hard to understand. It's extremely complex, and it's not getting the airtime it deserves, because Jeffrey Epstein was funding and cohorting with all of these scientists, particularly in genetics and transhumanist types of fields, and particularly in technology and technocracy and cryptocurrency types of fields. And when you look around at the world today, at the Palantirs, for example, of this world, at the digital surveillance state architecture that's getting built in all around us to control us, a huge portion of that industry was either direct friends with, directly connected to, or directly funded by Epstein and his network, or they are branched out from that. And the same is true for a lot of sketchy kind of transhumanist genetic and other scientific technologies. There's also a lot of communications about COVID-19 and associated viral stuff. And so that is this subtler layer of not so salacious topics, but topics that deeply connect to our future, and that we need to expose as quickly as possible, because Palantir is getting integrated into everything in our American government right now. And Peter Thiel is all over these files. He was deeply connected. Epstein was funding more than one of his ventures. And it's not just Peter Thiel. There's all sorts of other people in the industry associated. So that's one of the most pressing and important threads to pull on, I think, for everybody to understand, that is just inherently hard to understand, and it's not as salacious. So it's important for journalists to expose it, stay loud about it, and try to make it understandable to the average person.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. The focus is on these names, but they're slowly moving us to a fully integrated AI biometric future where everything is run through these cutouts, these CIA cutouts like Palantir and so forth. And the AI fusion with brain technology and yeah. So you're right about that. That's a huge blind spot for people right now, and everything will be tracked. And then when 6G rolls out,
yeah,
they'll have
Lord knows what it will be doing.
Yeah, they'll have our full movements down pat. And President Trump was talking about it openly a few weeks ago they'll be able to know everything right through the walls, how we move and move.
All right.
It's a crazy world.
Yeah. So let's think and talk while we still can. Absolutely.
Yep. Ian Carroll's the host of the Ian Carroll Show. Where can people find the show? How often are you live and all of that?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube. Radically, I don't hold a schedule. I'm completely independent, have no sponsors or support or anything like that, so I can do what I want. And I tend to just kind of go live off and on. Kick is the best place to follow all those live streams, but YouTube as well. And you can find me at Ian Carroll Show on YouTube or Cancel Ian Carroll on the other platforms. And if you want to keep up with everything that I'm doing, I've got a website, canceliancarroll.com. So thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
It's great to talk to you.
Our pleasure, man. Great to see you again. Thanks, Ian.
Absolutely.
Keep up the great work. So our thanks to Ian. Great interview and incredible deep dive here. I hope people give thought when they start to see these news publications that pop up and are pushing this narrative all over again. It's so weird. The New York Post,
and you think about living through the 90s, they had full impunity to do this to people and people didn't question. Go ahead, Philip.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt the interview, but I had serious beef with that article because the headline, when Clayton brought that up, it hit me. It's like the prosecutor said, the prosecutor knows that he didn't get convicted. So how can a prosecutor prosecute something, fail to prosecute the person, and then come out and say they're guilty? That just seems like they should be disbarred for that.
Right. And the headline should be, says prosecutor who failed to secure conviction. But right? Why is that your source?
But in the first sentence, it says, he says he's Michael Jackson is a pedophile who's guilty, or he's a guilty. That's the main headline.
I mean, because if a prosecutor charges somebody with murder and then they're found not guilty, that prosecutor can't come out then to the press and be like, that person is a murderer. That's at least defamatory.
I suppose, but a lot of times they'll say, we're so sad we didn't, convince the jury, we still believe. I guess you can say that, we lost the case, we didn't succeed here, but we still think this. But he has been acquitted in a court of law. At the very least, the press should know that and not, yes, we know that prosecutor thought that because he brought the case, dummies.
But what's the motivation from the New York Post, right? That you don't who in the newsroom, who at the highest levels, Rupert Murdoch or otherwise, who's, by the way, in the Epstein files, made a phone call to his newsroom and is like, let's dig up something on Michael Jackson and let's run a story. There's nothing new in the story. The only thing that you're doing is literally going back and getting an old prosecutor to write an article.
In the environment of, we have all of these allegations of new pedophiles. We don't want to cover them. Let's get an old one. Let's bring out Michael Jackson because people then maybe won't bite on the allegations against Larry Summers, Alan Dershowitz, Peter Attia, all of these people who were salaciously texting and emailing Epstein. We don't really want to look there. So let's go back and dig up some old stuff.
Yeah. What about an interview
unconscionable
or something with Howard Lutnick, right? Here's a guy who refused. He said, I broke off all ties in 2005. And now turns out that was a total lie. What about stories about that? No. Let's go back and dig up Michael Jackson stories.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, let us know what you think of that. That was a very intense interview, but I enjoyed it. I was glad to do it. I admit my bias as a lifelong lover of Michael Jackson, especially
just regularly done.
And what's this here? Les Wexner's attorney during his House Oversight Committee deposition.
It was just regularly done. Answer another question. 5 words, okay. Answer the question. Okay. It was just
What he said was, I will fucking kill you if you answer another question with more than 5 words, okay? So Les Wexner, so this is the guy was named as one of the potential accomplices of Jeffrey Epstein, claimed that he was the financial advisor to L.E.D. Rothschild and the Rothschild family in France.
and they had done personal work for the Rothschild family in France. He represented their whole families. There had been a whole bunch of people.
Yep.
He would say, like, I'm providing financial advice to the founders of Google.
What? Hold up, what?
I'm
Wait a
providing
minute.
financial advice to Jeff Bezos.
That's
I'm providing financial advice for the chief technologist at Google. And wow, I'm in good company because these are really smart guys with a lot of money.
Did Miss Maxwell ever introduce you to any young woman or girl?
No, I don't think she ever introduced me to any female or man.
Did Miss Maxwell ever ask you to introduce
that was more than 5 words.
young woman or girl to your friends or associates?
No,
Did you ever introduce any young woman or girl that you met through Miss Maxwell to any of your friends or associates?
Objection assumes in fact not in evidence.
Oh.
Did you ever see or become aware of President Trump having a sexual relationship with a person who was introduced to him by Epstein or Maxwell?
Oh, he's probably going to say no on this.
Has Donald Trump ever discussed Jeffrey Epstein with you?
nope.
That's surprising.
Did Jeffrey Epstein ever discuss Donald Trump with you?
He would say things like, I know President Clinton, or I know the Pope, or
He
I
would
know
name drop.
God, or Jeffrey dropped a lot of names.
You believe he specifically dropped Donald Trump's name?
No, I'm saying it could have, and I don't remember.
You don't remember? Yeah, he
Did
old.
Epstein ever share any information with you about Donald Trump's sexual activities?
Ooh.
Do you have a relationship with Donald Trump?
He introduced himself to me at the fashion show a couple of times, but I wouldn't say, hello, how are you?
It's about $1 billion provided in stocks or given directly to Mr. Epstein
From who?
by Wexner.
That's a
They
lot.
spent a lot of time together. Mr. Wexner
For $1 billion,
admitted that he
I
traveled
would.
to both Epstein's island as well as his other properties.
Yeah.
And we should be very clear
You got to pull those
that there would
logs.
be no Epstein Island. There'd be no
Yep.
Epstein plane. There'd be no money to traffic women and girls. Mr. Epstein would not be the wealthy man he was without the support of Les Wexner.
And to be clear, you at no point ever considered him to be a friend.
No, I didn't see Jeffrey as a friend. I saw Jeffrey, as I see Matt, my attorney, as friend. We're friendly, but we're not friends.
Did you yourself write this letter to Mr. Epstein?
Sadly, I did.
Read the main body of the birthday note for the record, please.
Oh,
I
that's
wanted to get
embarrassing.
You what you want. So here it is. Happy birthday, your friend Leslie.
What was your understanding of what Mr. Epstein would want?
What did Epstein want? Beef jerky or pizza?
He was a bachelor, so I drew a pair of boobs.
You've
as a kind of a joke and offhandedly.
Yeah.
I'd say.
You've
Okay.
You said a few times throughout this deposition today that you did not consider Mr. Epstein a friend of yours. However, you signed this letter, and I
Yeah.
quote, your friend Leslie. Why would you sign your friend Leslie to someone you did not consider to be a friend of yours?
I don't know.
It's a mystery. Like, yeah, I've never even heard of this.
Answer another question. 5 words, okay?
archived web pages. And when you line them up, asset by asset, you don't get closure on Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. You get a story about eugenics, transhumanism, and a baby farm that the political class suddenly pretends it just discovered. Now look at this place. This is a 10,000 acre compound in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, with its own airstrip, a bizarre temple looking building, as well as signs of huge underground infrastructure. Now, for decades, Epstein's Zorro Ranch sat there quietly. He was arrested in 2019. He died in August of that year. That was 6.5 years ago. And only now in 2026 does New Mexico's political class decide, hey, maybe we should look into this. Now, the obvious question is, why did they wait until the crime scene could be completely sanitized? On Monday, the New Mexico House of Representatives approved House Resolution 1, creating a special committee, a so-called Truth Commission, to investigate Zorro Ranch and allegations of criminal activity and public corruption tied to that property. Now, the resolution explicitly notes that Zorro Ranch has been the subject of great public concern since at least 2019, and that previous legislatures did nothing. It empowers this committee to hold hearings, compel witnesses, administer oaths, and issue subpoenas. It can operate through the end of 2026. So yes, on paper, this has teeth. They can drag people in under oath and demand documents. The land commissioner has also called for state and federal investigations. But again, Epstein's been dead for over 6 years. So how much physical evidence at this ranch is still untouched? Now, here's where things get eyebrow raising. Less than a week ago, a woman went out to Zorro Ranch and filmed what she saw. Heavy equipment, excavators out on the property, clear signs that the ground had been disturbed before the New Mexico House passed this investigative measure. Watch this.
What you're looking at is the main house, and don't be fooled, it is miles away from the road. Also, to note, there is some digging equipment, and that has not been here when I was here previously. This was the house from a similar angle in November, and it's looking a little different over on this side.
Okay, so ask yourself, if state lawmakers are just now giving themselves subpoena power, but there are excavators on site ahead of that, is this a serious criminal investigation or a cleanup operation with a committee bolted on afterward for show? Especially when we've seen how pathetic the official Epstein investigations have been in the past. Everybody knows Epstein as the sex trafficking billionaire, but at Zorro Ranch, there's another dimension. A decades-long obsession with eugenics, designer babies, cloning, and using this remote compound as a literal baby farm for his own DNA. So for a moment, leave aside the murder, the blackmail, the political connections, and let's look at the mad science. So 10 days before Epstein died, the New York Times published an article titled, "Jeffrey Epstein Hoped to Seed Human Race with His DNA." Now, the article quotes multiple scientists and businessmen who say that starting in the early 2000s, Epstein was openly talking about using his New Mexico ranch as a base where women would be inseminated with his sperm and would give birth to his babies. He reportedly envisioned as many as 20 women at a time impregnated at Zorro Ranch. One participant at a 2006 conference remembered Epstein talking about, quote, perfecting the human genome and being fascinated by how traits pass on and wanting to create superior humans. So this isn't internet rumor. This is Epstein talking to award-winning scientists about turning Zorro Ranch into a eugenic-style breeding facility. Then there's the corporate layer. Epstein's Virgin Islands company, Southern Trust, disclosed in filings that it was engaged in DNA analysis. So he gave money to transhumanist organizations like Humanity Plus. And in 2011, one of his charities gave $20,000 to the World Transhumanist Association, which rebranded as Humanity Plus, whose stated goal, by the way, is to influence a new generation of thinkers about humanity's next steps. So his foundation also paid the salary of Humanity Plus Vice Chairman Ben Gortzel. So we have a remote ranch, a stated desire for a baby farm, DNA analysis companies, and cash going to the transhumanist movement. This is not just a rich pervert. This is someone trying to engineer the future of the human species. Now we get to the new Epstein files, emails that show how this baby farm idea connects to actual lab work and real money. Brian Bishop is a Bitcoin developer, biohacker, and self-described mad scientist. And in the released emails, he's pitching Epstein on a designer baby project, talking about human cloning and laying out a funding proposal. In the first email, Bishop sends Epstein a presentation on his designer baby project. He notes that he and a partner have a series of questions about how serious you are about wanting this, quote, this isn't generic research, it's something additional to Bishop's existing work. He tells Epstein that most of the questions are about Epstein's, quote, requirements for secrecy and privacy regarding reputational risk and also any financial involvement. He suggests that whatever Epstein wants could be done, quote, under the banner of my designer babies project, since the other deliverable is similar and shares so many of the same procedures and lab requirements, unquote. So in other words, Epstein doesn't just want to donate to science, he wants secret science. He wants something that requires absolute anonymity. In a later email, Bishop is even more explicit, quote, sounds like you could be the first investor as long as absolute anonymity is kept, unquote. He says he always envisioned anonymity for the babies, that you can't publicly identify who they are or their parents or their benefactors because it would brand the child as a freak for life. He says the financial structure has to be designed around these secrecy demands. Epstein, the guy who already talked about breeding 20 women at a time at Zorro Ranch, is now being pitched on a designer baby project that needs total anonymity and careful financial structuring. Then we get to the price tag. One email lays out a 5-year plan around $9.5 million in funding. And the goal is to get out of the garage biology phase and reach the first live birth of a human designer baby and possibly a human clone within 5 years, unquote. That's not speculation. That's the language in the email. Live birth of a human designer baby, possibly a human clone. So when Epstein is talking about superior humans and seeding the human race, this isn't just cocktail party rambling. There is a concrete research roadmap being proposed to him. And then there's the geography. In an August follow-up, Bishop updates Epstein. They're proceeding with more mouse testing in my Ukraine lab, which is surgeries and microinjection, quote, unquote. He also says an amateur in Mississippi has been testing human sperm modification. So far, only fluorescent tagging, which doesn't work for my purposes yet, unquote. So now add it up. Okay. Epstein talks about a baby farm at Zorro Ranch starting in the early 2000s. He funds transhumanist causes and DNA analysis companies. He's in email conversations about funding a project to create human designer babies and possibly clones with testing in a Ukrainian lab and secret sperm modification experiments in Mississippi. All of this is happening as late as 2018, 2019, long after his first arrest. This isn't just in the emails. MIT Technology Review ran a piece in early 2019 about a Ukrainian biolab doing exploratory mouse experiments on gene modification ideas tied to do-it-yourself designer babies. The lab was part of Ukraine's state-run Academy of Medical Sciences, and the article reports that Bishop was paying the academy to run those experiments. Now, the question becomes, was Epstein the actual money behind this using Bishop as a front? In the emails, Bishop is obsessed with anonymity and says the investor must be completely hidden. That's exactly what Epstein is demanding. And just months after those emails, what appears to be Bishop's Twitter account is talking about startups that could one day offer designer babies as a service. Quote, there are startups offering designer babies and human embryo editing right now, unquote. Okay, so you have a transhumanist biohacker, public tweets about designer baby startups, private emails about human clones, and an investor, Jeffrey Epstein, who wants secrecy and a ranch set up as a breeding facility. So now let's bring in a victim side anecdote that lines up disturbingly well. In 2020, Mother Jones published an article where a reporter called people from Epstein's Black Book. One of them, a former art student they called Tracy, had a story. She had been told Epstein funded artists, so she went to his New York townhouse. She says he acted like a gentleman for 2 hours, talking about Dolly, the cloned sheep, and the whole cloning thing. He told her he had a place in New Mexico that already was working on cloning humans. Now the article says, actually, she didn't say New Mexico, she said Mexico. And the article says Mexico, but Epstein's actual scientific playground, the one tied to his eugenics fantasies, is in New Mexico, Zorro Ranch. So it's not hard to imagine a confused memory for that detail. Now, Tracy says that she left when he tried to grope her. But she told the reporter, quote, you're going to think it's totally crazy, but I bet you he cloned himself. And whoever killed themselves was a clone. I wouldn't put it past that. He's out there somewhere. He said he had a lab in Mexico because the Dolly thing got shut down. So is that provable? No, but it's one more data point. Victims and contacts independently recalling Epstein talking about cloning humans at his off-the-grid facility. Now we get into the most...
Remember, they say they removed the body and they had to use a body double. That's what was in the Epstein files. The government say they had to use a body double for some reason absolutely believe he cloned himself. We found out he was behind all of these people who doing that type of shit, got funding from him.
The most disturbing material, diary entries from a minor included in the latest Epstein files. This minor describes being impregnated by Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, referring to, quote, so many bonding moments with Jeffrey, Ghislaine, and their baby inside me, unquote. She writes, quote, I'm tired of keeping this secret. She talks about a superior gene pool. Why me? It makes no sense. Why my hair color and eye color? She explicitly calls Epstein's ideas very Nazi-like, connecting his theories to eugenics. She says she feels like a human incubator, not a person. She describes giving birth, being allowed only 10 to 15 minutes to hold and feed her baby before they took her. She's mine. I want her back. She writes that they took the first baby who survived and refers to an earlier miscarriage. The diary even includes a sonogram image, reinforcing that this wasn't just abstract psychological manipulation. There was a real pregnancy, a real child. So when you hear baby farm, this isn't just some outlandish speculative phrase. A minor victim is describing being used as a human incubator for Epstein's, quote, superior gene pool.
The government.
So if you're going to run a secretive cloning or designer baby program, you don't do it in the living room. You need infrastructure. There's an email in Epstein's files from the Zorro Ranch manager that looks boring at first. It's basically a punch list of things to inspect or repair, but the locations it mentions are not normal ranch features. The manager references cellar, bathroom, showers, plural. So you have a desert ranch with a cellar, multiple showers down there, and then an entire sub-cellar with wood flooring. Sub-cellar, multiple showers. This isn't just a root cellar for potatoes. It suggests significant underground facilities on a supposedly remote private estate. Drone footage of Zorro Ranch shows about 5 massive vents on the property, big structures that look like air intakes or exhaust stacks for something underground. Watch this.
I think what you're actually seeing in this shot is possibly 3 or more vents to an underground area, possibly more than that. I've looked at some of the footage from different angles, and I think there's at least 5 different vents leading to some underground area. And that dovetails with some of the information that some of the people that actually went to the ranch claim they saw a massive room full of computers underneath the house. And given the size of these vents, there's definitely a lot more than just one room full of massive computers, because you don't need this many vents this far apart for just one room. Even a really large room, even a giant basement, you wouldn't need that many vents. So I think there is a significant underground presence to that facility.
Okay. Put that together with the manager's references to cellars and sub-cellars, and with witness accounts from Epstein victim Maria Farmer, who says Epstein's properties had enormous mechanical rooms, tunnel systems, and rooms filled with computers with hidden cameras everywhere. According to Farmer, those mechanical big rooms were bigger than houses, and every estate had pinhole cameras recording everything. Now, you don't build that kind of underground infrastructure for fun. Now, step back from Zorro Ranch and look at the kind of organizations Epstein attached himself to. One is the Lifeboat Foundation, an NGO that describes itself as dedicated to helping humanity survive existential risks and the misuse of powerful technologies like genetic engineering and AI. Now, Epstein was listed on their site as on the board of financiers. After his arrest, that mention disappeared. When 2 researchers called Lifeboat and asked about Epstein, the organization tried to claim he did nothing for them and downplayed any association.
Hello.
Hi, is this Lifeboat Foundation?
Yes.
Which are massive, house-sized, underground living spaces.
No, we don't have any actual bunkers. It was just an idea by one of our board members. So we have like 1 page devoted to it on our site. It's not even like a primary goal of our organization. Our primary goal is to protect humanity against existential risks, and any real serious risk, any bunker on Earth would be insufficient to protect you against it.
Oh, I also see that it looks like Jeffrey Epstein was on the board here. Did he have some kind of...
No, he's not.
Oh, okay. Maybe is that old or something?
Yeah, so again, if you look at our bunker page, it's just a few paragraphs. I don't want to make a big deal out of it.
Oh, yeah. No, sorry. Not trying to make a big deal out of it here. It's just was looking up.
Okay. So that's interesting because they had previously advertised him as a financier. Lifeboat also promotes the idea of underground bunkers, life shield bunkers, to protect elites from catastrophic risks. Take a look.
Join our survival colonies. Secure your future in our state-of-the-art underground bunkers.
Okay, so here's the picture. Epstein, the transhumanist donor, the financier, on the financier board group of a group advocating underground bunkers to ride out future disasters. Epstein, whose ranch may have had massive underground facilities and vents. Epstein, who fantasized about seeding a post-catastrophic human race with his own DNA. Now let's jump to the present and the new owner of Zorro Ranch. For years, nobody knew who bought the ranch after it was put on the market following Epstein's death. It finally sold in 2023 via a newly formed LLC, reportedly for far less than the original asking price. Now, on Monday, we learned the buyer, Texas businessman and self-described MAGA Republican Don Huffins. Now, Huffins has been tied to Hest Group, Hest Investments, which is a venture capital firm. Now, archived snapshots of Hest, our team page, lists him as president. But when you go to the page now, it's been scrubbed. No Huffins. Can't be found. Page deleted. Okay, so why does that matter? Because Hest Investment led a 1.8 million SPV investment into a company called Secretome Therapies. In the press coverage, Hest CEO Don Huffins is quoted, "We're thrilled to support Secretome Therapeutics and its mission to revolutionize regenerative medicine." So what does Secretome do? Well, Secretome Therapeutics says it develops regenerative therapies using cells and factors derived from neonatal cardiac tissue. Now, according to their own description, they source cells from ethically consented neonatal cardiac tissue collected during medically necessary surgeries in full-term newborns treated for congenital heart defects. In other words, they conduct research on heart tissue taken from newborn babies under 30 days old. They insist that everything is ethically sourced and properly consented, and there's no evidence contradicting that. But here's the coincidence. The man funding research on newborn baby heart tissue is also the man who bought Jeffrey Epstein's ranch, the same Zorro Ranch that Epstein wanted to turn into a baby farm to seed humanity with his DNA. Now, Huffins has said he wants to convert Zorro Ranch into a Christian retreat and has talked about this in friendly interviews.
Now, you have plans to take something evil and bring it into goodness, bring it into light and positivity. Tell us about that plan.
Well, of course, that is the main reason I bought the property. This was obviously a dark place, and we wanted to put light in a dark place. It always shines the brightest when you do that. My faith is so strong in Jesus, and it really is. And I'm going to make this, the plan all along is to make this property into a Christian retreat. As a matter of fact, it's under construction today. And that's our goal. That's why we named it San Rafael. We named it Saint Raphael, as you probably know, an archangel, and his what he does and helps people with is healing and being the healer, and also blessing those that are traveling. And we think that's really germane to this property.
Okay, yeah, that's the line. This place of unimaginable abuse and alleged mad science will be reborn as a peaceful retreat center. Okay, maybe that's true. But when you stack it next to everything else, the designer baby emails, the victim diary about being a human incubator, the underground vents, the bunker NGOs, and the baby tissue venture, it sounds less like a redemption story and more like the setup to a bad B movie. So what was Zorro Ranch? Put all the numbered assets together, and here's what they suggest, right? Epstein openly talked about using Zorro Ranch to impregnate 20 women at a time and seed the human race with his DNA. He funded transhumanist organizations, DNA analysis companies, and sat on the financier board of a bunker building NGO. Emails show him in talks to finance a $9.5 million program aiming for the first live birth of a human designer baby or clone within 5 years, with mouse testing at a Ukrainian lab and early work on human sperm modification. We have a miner's diary described being impregnated by Epstein, treated as a human incubator for his superior gene pool, and having her baby taken away. The ranch itself appears to have cellars, subcellars, multiple showers underground, and huge vents consistent with large bunker or lab complex, with victims describing enormous mechanical rooms and ubiquitous cameras. And now the property belongs to a political figure backing a company that works with newborn baby heart tissue, while the state of New Mexico, 6.5 years late, suddenly decides it's time for a truth commission to investigate. So you can decide for yourself what was really going on at Epstein Zorro Ranch, but don't let anyone tell you there's nothing to see here. The documents, the emails, the victims, the underground structures, the transhumanist money trail, they all point in one direction. This wasn't just a sex crime hideaway. It looks a lot more like a clandestine lab for engineering the future of humanity, one stolen child at a time. Now, this is the first of our series on Zorro Ranch. We do have another part to this. There was just too much to cover today, but the plot gets darker, and you can look forward to that next week.
People to see and things to do. You may have already gotten vaccinated for flu and COVID-19, but
Micheal is not just another billionaire. He is one of the most influential gay men in modern power circles. A PayPal co-founder, an early Facebook investor, the architect behind Palantir, and a political donor whose money has quietly reshaped elections. He is strategic, he is private, and he does not explain himself. For years, his name has hovered around larger cultural conversations, elite tech gatherings, ideological disruption, billionaire influence, and yes, even proximity to people like Jeffrey Epstein, who, by the way, Peter Thiel's name is listed in those files over 2,000 times. Recently, a video surfaced of Peter walking down the street when someone pressed him about his connection to Jeffrey Epstein.
Mr. Thiel, do you have any comments about Palantir's surveillance of the American people, sir? Or any of your connections to Jeffrey Epstein? People are rather concerned about that last particular one. I think the American people want this surveillance tech being used against them.
This person writes, he's walking fast because he's afraid of the people. None of the billionaires feel safe. It's a sign of their guilt, but their greed won't let them stop. They're like sick animals. They must be put down or they'll hurt all of us. This silence, especially from very powerful people like Peter, tends to amplify all of our curiosity. And Peter Thiel has built an entire career on operating from a place of silence. He married his partner, Matt Danzizian, in a surprise ceremony in 2017. The wedding was kept so quiet, the guests reportedly thought they were attending just a birthday party. That is truly how Peter moves. Quietly, strategically, and without spectacle. His personal life is almost invisible, because in 2023, the death of model Jeff Thomas pulled Peter Thiel into the headlines. Jeff had previously spoken about his relationship with Peter. In interviews, he suggested that he lived a kept life for a period of time, though he also made it clear that his relationship was starting to change and that he was really wanting independence. On March 8th, 2023, Thomas was found dead outside of an apartment building in Miami. Authorities investigated the death as an offing of himself, and there is no evidence that Peter Thiel was involved, but to those who knew Jeff personally, they tend to think something else was going on. I knew Jeff personally and met Peter Thiel with him on our trips out to California when we both lived in Central Park South. He didn't fall off a balcony. Another person writes, dude had his boyfriend thrown off a balcony. And lastly, I'm telling you, white male billionaires are above the law in America. Unfortunately, the last one is probably not far from the truth. Let me know if you'd like a deep dive on Jeff and that horrific situation, because unfortunately, there is a lot there and it's really, really alarming.
Have you ever felt like you should have a skincare routine, but have no idea where to start? As I get older, I am becoming off of your personalized skincare
Peter Thiel himself, cementing his role as a political kingmaker, not just a Silicon Valley investor. He also co-founded Palantir, a data analytics company that has received major backlash.
You have created the system which you call kill chain.
For me, it's the kill chain. Palantir is here to disrupt and, when it's necessary, to scare enemies and on occasion kill them.
According to Thiel, quote, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible." Chilling. Either way, Peter Thiel is not one to sit on the sidelines. With a net worth estimated around $30 billion, he does fund influence.
So, even if you're evil, you're at least not bad. You're not incompetent.
He builds systems, and again, he operates very, very quietly, which is why when his name begins circulating in a whole different kind of rumor, one involving a 20-year-old internet personality, people started paying attention. Why would someone like that be interested, even hypothetically, in someone whose entire brand revolves around him live streaming live, courting controversy, and literally living publicly online? It's a stark contrast. So let's break it down. To understand why Peter Thiel's name is even being whispered in this kind of a story, you have to understand the other side of it. A 20-year-old internet personality known as Clavicular. If you're over 30, you may have never heard of him. I had never heard of him until I read a New York Times article that they did on him a couple of days ago. His real name is Braden Peters. He operates inside a hyper-online subculture known as looks maxing, a world obsessed with optimizing physical attractiveness to an extreme degree.
You know about bone smashing? Bone smashing? It's according to Wolff's Law. So like when you break down a bone, it grows back stronger.
Jaw lines, bone structure, testosterone, steroids. The idea that your body is just a project that can be engineered into perfection.
My mom used to take these away when I was growing up because I was always bone smashing.
And supposedly, Clavicular, who says he's straight, says that Matt Bomer has the perfect face. The New York Times writes, "The looks maxing community prefers people who look like Mr. Bomer, lantern-jawed, symmetrical, white. A black man who attempted to make looks maxing content was radically harassed," Wired reported last year. Wow. And Clavicular doesn't just participate in that world, he has leaned all the way in. He has built his brand on
President Trump trusts retired teacher Terry Leo Wilson because she's teaching liberals a lesson in Austin. Leo Wilson banned DEI programs in school.
a spectacle, and he thrives on attention. Recently, he went completely viral after a clip of him came out where he apparently gets what they call frame mogged. I guess a fan had asked to take a picture with him, and the fan apparently had a better frame or build than Clavicular. This clip exploded. The meme spread far beyond his niche audience. Suddenly, people who never heard of looks maxing or Clavicular himself knew his face. Clavicular, who goes by Clav for short, has openly talked about steroid use, extreme dieting, and even says he uses crystal meth as a method to stay skinny.
I do meth, yes. So I do meth to, basically suppress my appetite and try to get leaner.
And when your audience is as young and impressionable as Clav's is, critics argue there's a difference between transparency and influence. Regardless, Clav is not discreet, which makes what came next even stranger.
Do you know who Peter Thiel is?
Peter Thiel, yeah. He's a billionaire that owns Palantir.
I got invited to a Peter Thiel party. You think that's going to be a Diddy party? Probably.
Whew. Billionaires, they get a little creepy.
Yeah, dude, I don't know. I don't want to get diddied.
This person writes, shocking the gay billionaire would want to have Clav at his parties. Clavicular, I really love your stuff. I'd love for you to come hang out so we can talk about the Antichrist and maybe have a little fun by the balcony afterwards. Something about even seeing Peter Thiel's face in that tweet just gives me like the heebie-jeebies. Like there's something about his face that just makes my skin crawl. But that wasn't the only clip that really caught people's attention. Around the same time, Clav began talking more openly about this mysterious person who was giving him a lot of money. Someone he referred to as P. According to him, this person had sent him nearly $500,000 over the span of just a few months.
But P, he's going crazy, man. Already donated $500 and I'm giving subs. What the fuck?
Since the very beginning of Clavicular's streaming career, this mysterious person known only as P has been his #1 top donator. In Clavicular's very first week streaming on Kick alone, P dropped over $150,000 on him. Since then, he's continued showering him with occasional $1,000 donations. Things took an even wilder turn during Clavicular's brief flash visit to Los Angeles, where he received an exclusive invite to a private party held at Thiel's $11.5 million Hollywood Hills mansion, an event known for only admitting the absolute top echelon of society. Ever since that party, fans have been heavily speculating that P is actually billionaire Peter Thiel himself. It does seem awfully coincidental that in the first clip we see him bring up Peter Thiel, and then he starts mentioning that someone by the name of P, that he's saying is a him, is donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to him. It could just be coincidental, but there is something there. Clav has denied any association with Peter Thiel, and there are no confirmed financial transactions between the two of them.
Oh, God, we got to clear this up. Are you in any way affiliated with Peter Thiel?
No.
Okay. We'll make sure. People online were thinking that you're being funded, but you got your own mission.
Correct, yes.
Hell yeah.
There's no secret funding.
Hell yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Got to make that.
They say this about everyone when they become famous.
I know.
I think
know.
they were saying that because like I got my charges dropped, so they were like, oh my God, there's no way. There has to be some shadow organization funding.
But then another detail surfaced. In February of this year, so this month, he got arrested on 2 counts of felony offenses: forgery involving possession of a forged instrument and dangerous drug possession/use, along with 1 misdemeanor count for a minor using a false ID to enter. He was facing up to 8 years in prison. But then, 18 hours later, he walked free. A lot of people assumed that Peter Thiel bailed him out. And what makes it weirder is his lawyer had one rule.
He also cannot leave the state of Arizona. That's the big one. Big one right now is he can't leave the state of Arizona.
But then, before we knew it, he was on a plane to fly to New York for his first fashion show. To many of his followers, seeing Clav step into this fashion world felt like the next logical chapter in his viral trajectory.
Oh my God, Clavicular just looks max mogged at Elena Velez. What the fuck?
This person writes, I feel like a proud father. Another person writes, I haven't been happier for another person in a long time, really. So he has an audience that really loves him and cheers him on. And it really made sense to all of his followers. He had reached really the highest form of looks maxing, a viral body and an avant-garde runway. But then people started to look closer. The show was connected to designer Elena Velez, a controversial, boundary-pushing figure in fashion known for blending art, politics, and elite cultural spaces. Some of the conversations around her brand have intersected with debates about race, IQ, and human biodiversity, topics widely rejected by mainstream science. This person writes, Elena Velez is the disgusting freak for constantly offering her throat to the Nazi right wing so that they can stick their boots in it. We need to shame people who attend her shows and shame the stylists who put talent in her garments. And, surprise, surprise, Elena has ties to Peter Thiel. It's all connected in a very weird, coincidental way. This is from her Wikipedia. Velez is alleged to be associated with scenes connected to Peter Thiel and the New Libertarian and Tech Right, collaborating with digital art collective Amelia Corporation in 2025. The scene is known for its reactionary politics and associations with Peter Thiel. Again, Clav has denied being associated with Peter Thiel in any way.
Looks like it's swole season.
Got to keep up with.
Yeah, bro.
Fucking Peter Thiel's trying to get in your.
Dude, that was the craziest one. I swear. Yeah, I got blacklisted from his events now. That's what I heard.
Who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
In fact, a couple days ago, a journalist came to do some bizarre interview with him. And the minute she tried to pivot the conversation to his connections to Peter Thiel, he completely shut down the interview, turning the tables on her and saying that she was the one that had ties to Peter Thiel and he wanted nothing to do with that.
Like, you know what? Let me get $15,000.
Bless. I mean, I'm happy that you did it. Like, it was cool.
A shithead reporter who's tied to, you know, a group who's maybe not doing some great things, you know, we're going to fuck her shit up. So, you know, we're on.
So
live
wait,
stream.
you have people, right, that are tied to.
Have a good day. Take care.
Show me the proof.
Have a good day.
This is good storytelling.
Take care.
So this is what you do.
Hey, Joe, our guest is ready to go.
That's crazy. Okay, you're funny. All right, well, good stuff. I mean, shit.
It's all so strange for my mid-30-year-old self to grasp, but this connection with him and Peter Thiel does fascinate me because I can't help but notice the contrast. On one side, we have a billionaire who has built his power on privacy, control, and silence. And then on the other, a 20-year-old who broadcasts every chaotic moment in his life. It's this old world dark culture meets this new age algorithmic dark culture, but I guess it does make sense when you think about who these two people specifically are. This clavicular kid is clearly being used as a Peter Thiel pet project to promote body modification and transhumanism amongst young men. Very dark. Thank you for watching today's video. I figured I'd switch it from an Epstein.
Like, what would your last meal be? Oh, brother, probably a fully loaded deep dish pizza. I love all kinds of pizza. Yeah.
Hillary, you are next. Name the most mischievous thing Chelsea did as a teenager in the White House.
My answer was order pizza, and here's what I mean by that.
Chelsea, your mother often babysits for you. What does she do that you don't approve of?
Pizza for lunch and dinner every day.
Pizza for lunch and dinner every day. But there's more to it than just that, guys.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I mean, the place was filled with her friends. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's true that, you know, the White House does like to prepare all the food. And the kids were not always enthusiastic about the food that they were being served. So they were always trying to call for pizzas. And you can't order a pizza to the White House. I'll just tell you that right now. And we didn't.
Sometimes there were exceptions.
Yeah, sometimes you could go out maybe, and one of the kids could go out maybe and meet the
and pick it up.
Yeah,
Get
the
it through
pizza
the
driver.
fence.
Yeah, but the first time you would have thought that, you know, war had been declared. There's a pizza truck outside that says a pizza was ordered. What do we do with it? And yeah, we had lots of challenges like that.
So we're going to keep going because I have something explosive to show you. But guys, in light of what she just said, when we go back to Pizzagate, right? When they're all ordering pizza, it's always pizza, and that's even what Chelsea Clinton was ordering. All of those things, right? Well, remember, she also said that, well, you're not allowed to bring in outside food, which I've told you guys. But then when we go back into Pizzagate, into Hillary Clinton's leaked email server, what does this say? What does this say? It says, look, oh my goodness, subject, get ready for Chicago Hot Dog Friday. I think Obama spent about $65,000 of the taxpayers' money flying in pizza and hot dogs, from Chicago for a private party at the White House not long ago. Assume we're using the same channels? Huh? And then the response says, to celebrate all you hot dogs out there, Eric, you can participate as well. Are we using the same channels? Oh, guys, if we were to go down those files, well, it would take us weeks.
You know what? Since everybody's talking about the Epstein file release, I would love to address everybody on here who's saying, oh my God, we had no idea. We had no clue. That's not true. Do you guys remember Hillary's emails and how everyone was so upset and they're like, oh my God, like, stop talking about it. It's just email, LOL. Wrong. Didn't you guys ever think it was weird that she deleted all these emails, that everyone was in an uproar about it and the media kept trying to spin it? This is why we kept bringing it up. This email specifically is one I cannot get over.
Uber service to transport Ruby Emerson and Mauve, $11.99
almost 7, almost 6. So you'll have some further entertainment and they will be in the pool for sure. Go ahead, spin that. Spin that in an appropriate way. What do you think that means? Keep in mind, this is a real email. Like, let's really think about this for a second. This is a perfect example of like, we've been trying to say something, but a lot of you scream conspiracy theory or witch hunt. You don't listen. The general public is just as bad as the media when it comes to covering things up. You guys had the opportunity to learn and you didn't allow it. You guys still do it today. So it's like, don't cry. Oh no, I didn't know.
Now we're going to get to Hillary Clinton's interview, all right, and discussing Epstein. She didn't really know him and all of that. But there's something I want to remind people of, or maybe you never knew about this, and it's pretty much coming back out right now. But I have known about this for a long time, and I'm so glad I have this opportunity because understand that Hillary Clinton's closet, well, it runs deep and pretty wide. Oh, look at that. Matt Lauer and Savannah Guthrie.
And some serious allegations this morning facing the State Department.
That's right. According to internal State Department memos, the agency might have called off or intervened in investigation into possibly illegal and inappropriate behavior within its ranks, allegedly to protect jobs and avoid scandals. This concerns the time that Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. We want to get right to NBC's chief White House correspondent, Chuck Todd, with the latest. Chuck, good morning to you.
Good morning, Savannah. You know, there's an old saying in Washington that the cover-up is worse than the crime. But in this case, both parts of it are disturbing. Allegations of prostitution and pedophilia and allegations that those crimes were somehow covered up or not looked into. So the State Department this morning is having to respond to those claims and those investigations of misconduct by State Department officials, including by an ambassador and security agents attached to then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And the allegations are that these investigations were whitewashed, quashed altogether, and that those orders came from high up.
NBC News has obtained documents related to ongoing investigations into some disturbing allegations involving State Department personnel and at least one ambassador. A State Department memo says the ambassador, quote, routinely ditched his protective security detail in order to solicit sexual favors from both prostitutes and minor children. The memo also says a top State Department official directed department investigators to, quote, cease the investigation into the ambassador's conduct. It's just one of what another document describes as, quote, several examples of undue influence from top state officials. On Monday, a State Department spokesperson will not confirm specific investigations.
I'm not going to talk about specific cases, but I can say broadly that the notion that we would not vigorously pursue criminal.
Was that Jen Psaki? Girl, is that you? And Chuck Todd? But Jen Psaki, look at you. You said that there was nothing to see here, folks. Isn't that crazy how quickly people forget true history? And that's why I'm pulling up the things I pulled up about Bill Gates and Melinda Gates having the guy who worked at their estate. He was the engineer for their personal computers at their estate. He was then caught. The police came to Bill and Melinda Gates' house to get him. He was caught with, I think it's 6,495 videos of children being grape sodaed. I have to say it like that. No, it is the actual act. But then guess what? Guess what, guys? He only ended up with 90 days in jail, but then he got even lighter. It was suspended because he had to care for his ailing mother. Oh, then he had to register on the offender registry, but just in Washington state. But then nothing ever happened. Oh, and they identified 133 of the children. There are thousands of children, but they identified 133 children. They didn't bust up the ring. They didn't do any big investigation. They had actual children who had been like, guys, we were talking about the full-on act, boys and girls, okay, prepubescent children. And all this guy got was a little plea deal where he had to do 90 days in jail, but then that was suspended to take care of his mother. That's it. That's what they found while he was working for Bill and Melinda Gates. But just like Melinda Gates has no idea, Bill Gates has no idea about that. And that's, of course, what Hillary Clinton is talking about. But guys, you see, it goes all the way back to even when she was Secretary of State, the things that not just what was happening during when she was First Lady, her and Bill Clinton were in the White House, but even as Secretary of State, they were covering up these crimes. Now let's hear what the former secretary, former First Lady, former failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton has to say. And then I got a little more to show you, of course.
We have nothing to hide. We have called for the full release of these files repeatedly. Something is going on. They know it. I know it. If they're going to have me testify, I would prefer to do it in public because I want everybody to see it at the same time. If I have to do it behind closed doors, they're not going to like what I have to say because I have very strong opinions about what it is they're hiding and who they are protecting.
Really? I have some strong opinions too. Well, looky here. Is that Bill Clinton, Jeffrey Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell? But they don't really know him. I don't know anything about this. Nothing to see here, folks. Move on. Oh, and look at this. Here's the $20,000 dress Chelsea Clinton wore to her $3 million wedding, paid for by the Clinton Foundation Haitian Relief Funds, which come from USAID. And Chelsea Clinton also got, I think, like $83 million from USAID. But who is that? What's happening here? Oh, my goodness. Right there at Chelsea Clinton's wedding is Ghislaine Maxwell. Isn't that something? But they have no connections. They don't like. What are we talking about, guys? We shouldn't even be bringing this up. She's been pushing for the release of the files. Have you? Oh, Hillary, things are not looking good. Jeffrey Epstein's visits to the Clinton White House, let alone all the times going to Epstein Island. But look at this. Look at these are all the times. 17 times Jeffrey Epstein was invited as an honored guest to the Clinton White House. But she's been pushing for the file release. But let's go back and hear what else Hillary Clinton has to say. Then we're going to show you some more.
Do you regret the links that there have been?
We have no links. We have a very clear record that we've been willing to talk about, which my husband has said. He took some rides on the airplane for his charitable work. I don't recall ever meeting him.
Did you ever meet Ghislaine Maxwell?
I did on a few occasions, and thousands of people go to the Clinton Global Initiative.
There's a lot more I can get into, but this is just one file that was found on the DOJ website. So there is someone named Olivier Colombe, right? And he is first writing to Jeffrey Epstein. He says, could you organize a discreet meeting between Sarko and Hillary Clinton in New York? If not, who should we ask? Then Jeffrey replies, meetings with Hillary are not easily discreet. When? So people come to Jeffrey Epstein so that they can get a meeting or he can make arrangements and meetings with Hillary Clinton. And he is saying, well, they're not easy to arrange. They have to be very discreet because it seems like he's the handler of these meetings, people who want to come to Hillary Clinton. But again, she has no idea anything about Jeffrey Epstein. She has no idea about anything. She doesn't even really know the man. Okay. Now I want to show you this last clip that is absolutely insane, and I haven't seen anybody else talk about other than the woman on the screen, which she actually doing a lot of good work with the Justin Baldoni and the Blake Lively case when I was back doing that. But you're going to want to see this because it is absolutely insane. But before we do, I just want to show you once again. You can go to realmelanieking.com to support the work I have going on over here, digging through all these files, trying to find as much information as possible and expose these evil degenerates. Because as I've told you, a lot of people are now waking up. A lot of people are saying, well, the conspiracy theorists were right. I can't believe it. Well, this is one of the shirts that I have put out. Now it says women, but I have it for men as well. But it says the Great Awakening. This is what's called the Great Awakening map. And this is kind of a map of all of the conspiracy theories, the majority of them. Finding out about, Pizzagate and Epstein, well, it's down here. Yeah, like that's where you're at. If this is just your kind of first foray into this. But then we have all of this to come. Okay. So this is something that I designed. I wanted to put this out for you guys. And it says, believe your eyes, not their lies. Now, I also have this for men, like I said, and I have it in different colorways and designs. Let me show you quickly. Okay, so I'm over on the men's page, but this is the same Great Awakening map. I just have that kind of like sunset in the back. And then this is the original map right here. Okay, the original white map. But then I also have the Great Flash version. And yeah, we're going to have to get into that. So I have different colorways for men and women. If you want to support the work that I have going on over here, if you want to support me as an independent, I'm not even a reporter. I'm just a commentator. I'm just finding these things. You can head on over there. The link for this will be in the description box, as well as the link for my other channel, Melanie Offscript, which I just posted about the ice wall. And it is crazy, guys, because I'm going to be covering a lot more news, kind of really showing the signs and wonders of Christ's return, because we are in the last seconds of the last days. This is why all this truth is coming out. This is why they're just allowing us to talk about it freely. Things, they're exposing this. And now Obama's come out and he says that there's aliens. Those aren't aliens. They're demonic beings, most likely all of them as well, as the Bible says. And we're seeing all these things come out, but then we know, I believe some of this is a distraction to digital ID. I covered somewhat yesterday in a video that digital ID, that one of the majority stakeholders in digital ID is Bill Gates, and that he and Epstein were plotting and talking about that in the Epstein file. See, they know everyone's going to pay attention to one thing, but then they disclose something that I don't think a lot of people are seeing. So if you want to support what I'm doing here, again, the link for realmelanieking.com will be below. So she's trying to talk in code because, guys, and then, I have to as well, because there's a lot of censorship here on YouTube, but also on TikTok. But understand, I mean, there's a lot to get into that whole Pizzagate rabbit hole, guys. Well, like I said, I'm going to be covering that. But understand, did you know the Clinton staffer, a top level staffer, had a blog for her grandchildren with raw, uncut footage, but you could pay premium, and then you can also get an invite to play with the grandchildren. You can pay a premium membership so that you can see it fully uncensored what was happening to these babies. But yet, Hillary Clinton has no idea about any of this. But once again, guys, I got some more digging to do. I'm going to be bringing you guys some more stories. Make sure you check out or you subscribe to my other channel, Melanie Offscript. I'm going to be posting something over there today.
His amazing story. He was delayed because his wife insisted that he finally, after years, take his child to school. So he took his child to school that one day, because normally he would have been in the building at 6 o'clock in the morning. That's that business, right? So you owe your wife a lot and your child a lot, right?
What a fortunate coincidence. Also, what was this laughter about? That is like so weird. So what did Howard Lutnick, Trump's Secretary of Commerce, know about that fateful September day 25 years ago? And maybe more importantly, where did he learn of all that information? Let's start at the beginning. In 2001, Howard Lutnick was the CEO of a very powerful Wall Street firm called Cantor Fitzgerald, whose office was located on the 105th floor of One World Trade Center in New York City. And you sort of know what happened in September of that year. But Howard was not in the office that morning where 658 of his employees perished. He was taking his son, Kyle, to school, to his first day of kindergarten, as we've been told. Evidently, his wife insisted that he just had to do it.
That alone is an amazing story. He was delayed because his wife insisted that he finally, after years, take his child to school. So he took his child to school that one day, because normally he would have been in the building at 6 o'clock in the morning. That's that business, right? So you owe your wife a lot and your child a lot, right?
What a fortunate coincidence. Also, what was this laughter about? That is like so weird. Just Howard being Howard, I guess. He's just a jolly old guy. Or is he?
The head of Cantor Fitzgerald, Harold Lutnick, just happened to be out of the office that day that the terrorist struck. Mr. Lutnick was taking his son to his first day of kindergarten. Now he says he has a very different view of business and life. He spoke to our business correspondent, Terry Keenan, earlier today.
We are really focused on trying to make sure that our 700 families who lost a member of their family are taken care of. And so I spent the day yesterday and part of the day in talking to our insurance company. Our insurance company, CNA, told me that they would, they told our guys, they didn't tell me, and then they told me that that they were willing to treat this as an accidental death, which means that they would double the policy for all of my victims upstairs and all of us, and so that added $35 million to that group upstairs. But the sad thing is, so $35 million sounds like so much money, but if you divide it by 700 people, it's only $50,000. It's not enough to. So that's why we need to work on our foundation.
Yeah, and you've set up that foundation. We'll give the information to our viewers. You explain the needs of these young families. Many of your traders were just in their 30s.
We've got the average employee we have is around 33 years old.
33 years old. Probably just a coincidence that he threw that in there. I don't know. But the main point that I want to draw your attention to is that he said that the insurance company would pay double to the victims. But did that money really go to the victims? Well, we found out years later, decades later, that the $135 million settlement with American Airlines went to the firm, Cantor Fitzgerald, and its partners, not the families of the dead. At the time of the statement, Cantor's CEO Howard Lutnick issued a statement, quote, "For the insurance companies, this was just another case, just another settlement, but not for us. We could never and will never consider it ordinary. For us, there is just no way to describe this compromise with inapt words like ordinary, fair, or reasonable." But Lutnick and his fellow Cantor partners reportedly kept some of the money, a lot of the money actually, for the firm and distributed the rest to themselves in proportion to their ownership stake. Lutnick, the firm's biggest partner, may have received as much as $25 million. So the dude kept the money. The guy who didn't go to work that September morning because his wife told him not to in order to take his son to school, something he supposedly never does, is not only alive, but tens of millions of dollars richer. And guess who Howard Lutnick just happened to live right next door to? Yep, Jeffrey Epstein. They were literal next door neighbors in Manhattan, 9 East 71st Street and 11 East 71st Street. And this is where things take an even darker turn as it pertains to world geopolitics and who might have known what prior to that fateful September morning.
When it comes to 9/11, it's pretty weird that two things are missing: the Epstein files from 1999 through 2001, and Howard Lutnick, our Secretary of Commerce. When it comes to Jeffrey Epstein and Howard Lutnick, they had a relationship. I mean, for one thing, they were literal neighbors. There are email correspondence between the two of them in the files about getting dinner at Little St. James. Jeffrey made donations in Howard Lutnick's honor, and Lutnick hosted parties that Epstein was invited to. And when it comes to 9/11, there's very little in the Epstein files, but there's this email to Ghislaine Maxwell. Any interest in being on the Shadow Commission on 9/11, the membership list is secret. And 1 week after 9/11, a message to Ghislaine Maxwell: where is the real pilot? Is it possible that Epstein and his connections may have had something to do with 9/11? And that one reason these files might be missing is because Epstein was doing the neighborly thing and warning his friends. Or is all of this just one big coincidence?
Now, as Danny points out, this could be just one big old coincidence. We don't really know for sure, but I certainly think it's worth asking some follow-up questions like, Why are all the files between 1999 and 2001 conspicuously missing from the DOJ Epstein release? Did he know something? Was he talking to somebody about something? You know, his well-connected group of elites, what were they talking about? There certainly were some interesting questions being asked about who the real pilot was or why Ghislaine was asked to be on the 9/11 Commission at all. And with, you know, the other stuff that we know about, like the dancing Israelis, these coincidences are really starting to pile up. But the one thing that I can tell you that we know for sure is Howard Lutnick is a big fat liar. Okay, just take a listen to this clip.
He was your neighbor for 10 years. How well did you know him?
All right. So we are in number 11 and he lives in number 9.
Right.
So we renovate, we buy our house, and our house is pigeons and mice.
Right.
Okay. It was derelict.
Right.
So we rebuild our house. We move in 2005. Okay. Jeffrey Epstein is arrested in like 2008, I think, something like that.
Right.
So knock on the door. His assistant on like a Saturday says, Mr. Epstein, your neighbor would like to invite you over for coffee. So my wife and I go next door. You know, we walk the 7 steps,
yes,
right, to the next house for coffee. We share a wall.
Right.
Right. So it's in New York City. So he invites us in. We have coffee in this, and he says, do you want a tour? We said, great.
Interesting.
He's got a really big house.
Every room you went into?
He's got, well, I'll tell you. So his house is like super big, really wide. And so he gives me a tour in the living room, big living room. And then across from it is double doors. I assume it's the dining room.
Yeah.
And he opens the doors and there's a massage table in the middle of the room.
Ooh.
And candles all around and stuff. So I ask very insightful, cutting questions. I say to him, massage table in the middle of your house? How often do you have a massage? And he says, every day. And then he gets weirdly close to me.
Ooh.
And he says, and the right kind of massage.
Ooh.
Now my wife is standing here. So she looks at me and I look at her and we say, I'm sorry, we have to go. And we left. And in the 6 or 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again.
Oh,
so I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or for even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross.
There's something very disturbing about someone who could just come up with a melodramatic story like that and boldly lie to your face with such vigor and detail, telling us that he was never in the same room with Epstein again, even though he knows emails like this exist, where he's directly corresponding with Epstein about having lunch on his island. You know what I mean? Like, this guy is an absolute psychopath. Like, who knows what he's capable of? And here's another one. This is proof that Lutnick and Epstein were business partners together when they acquired a tech company in 2012. There's also a photo of this creepy mask found on Epstein's property that looks an awful lot like Howard Lutnick. I don't know. I mean, you tell me, but I definitely see some resemblance here. And usually I make the point, when someone can tell a small lie, they're capable of telling bigger lies. Well, now we got this guy who is capable of telling a grand lie. So what else could he be lying about? You know, when you see data like this, almost no files between 1999 and 2001, it doesn't look like a coincidence. It looks like a cover-up. There's something here that they don't want us to see. What is that? And the question that I think we have to ask is, who are they protecting? Is it Trump? Is it the CIA? Is it a certain foreign government that they're trying to protect? I know there's this whole, who did Epstein actually work for? Was it Israel? Was it Russia? But we just learned today through Dropsite News that the Israeli government installed and maintained a security system at Epstein's apartment. And this is the email from 2016. Quote, Jeffrey says he does not mind holes in the walls and this is all just fine. and he's talking about this technician that's coming over to install an alarm system that we now know is on behalf of the state of Israel. So I've been, pretty careful of the language that I've used throughout this whole expose because I'm trying to not get my whole channel nuked just yet. But I hope I've been clear enough in the sense that if you don't think that there has been a cover-up of epic proportions that has been taking place for the last 25 years surrounding the events before and after 9/11, you might be the conspiracy theorist, not me. And in regards to these files, there are so many rabbit holes to go down because A, there's all this evidence of heinous crimes taking place that are very, very dark. But B, on top of that, maybe even bigger are these geopolitical implications and the big question of how were these people able to get away with these crimes for so long, right? They must have had something that scared the U.S. law enforcement agencies at the highest levels. And that question, for the sake of the future of our country, is something we cannot stop investigating. That is it for me this week. What do you think? Is this all just one big coincidence, or could it really be one massive conspiracy? Sound off in the comment section below. Also, if you want to support my journalism, you can become a member by
and actually makes me feel good after.
You're holding a piece.
What message would you like to send for Israel, and also what do you think about Deni Avdia?
Hopefully someday I can make it over there. Like I said, I've never been over there, but I've heard nothing but great things. And
how is it possible at this point that LeBron has, quote, heard nothing but great things about Israel? Even if you like Israel, by now, there's got to be something bad you've heard about them, right? His answer probably has nothing to do with these allegations, pause to read, or these, once again, pause to read, or just how much LeBron loves Diddy parties.
Hey, everybody know ain't no party like a Diddy party, so.
Yeah, that's what's up. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and say that did not age well, but today's story is bigger than just LeBron. We're talking about the alleged fact, that the entire NBA has seemingly been compromised over the years by a certain foreign nation, and we have all the receipts to back it up.
I tweet Free Palestine. Less than 10 minutes after I tweet that, I get a call from the commissioner of the NBA.
Stop it.
Agents, people like working with my foundation at the time, Texas, you got to erase this tweet. You got to take this down. You're going to get it. I'm like, what did I do that was so bad?
Can somebody explain to me?
Yeah, can somebody explain? And it was just like, because I went against the grain. I said something that people didn't like. And now
not people didn't like, they did.
Now that is the billion-dollar question. Who is the they in this situation? Let's start at the top, shall we? The leadership of the NBA, particularly under the tenure of Commissioner Adam Silver, has maintained a consistent and documented affinity for the state of Israel. This relationship is characterized by high-level diplomatic engagement, institutional apologies for geopolitical deviations, and the utilization of a sport as a tool for cultural normalization. Adam Silver, who was born into a Jewish-American family in New York, succeeded David Stern, another figure who was instrumental in fostering the league's internationalism and its specific ties to Israel. And that, my friends, is what we call sports washing, which we all the time criticize the Saudis for doing. Oh my God, did you see that they set up a new golf league? How could you play in it? Remember 9/11? When in fact, the OG sports washers might be Israel. You see, a few decades ago, they established something called Basketball Without Borders in the state of Israel. as reported by the Jerusalem Post. Quote, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver traveled to Israel to witness the event, with Hall of Famer David Robinson headlining the list of former players taking part in the camp, which also includes Maccabi Tel Aviv legend Anthony Parker. And that is what they do to ingratiate themselves with celebrities and politicians and athletes and everybody else. Come over to Israel. Look how great we are. And they give you a whole propaganda tour. You go to the wall, you do this and that. Meanwhile, they may or may not have bugged or even broken into your hotel room. Visit at your own peril is what I will say for now. So a few years ago, in a drop-down menu where fans can nominate their favorite player for the NBA All-Star game, there was listed Palestine occupied territory in the drop-down. And of course, Israel went berserk. Quote, an Israeli minister lashed out at America's National Basketball Association Thursday after an official website apparently listed Palestine-occupied territory in a list of countries, and the league later apologized for erring. Culture and Sports Minister Miri Regev wrote a scathing letter to the NBA Commissioner Adam Silver Thursday, demanding he remove the listing from NBA.com, citing the fact that it did not fall in line with U.S. President Donald Trump's positions. A spokesman for the NBA told the Times of Israel the listing was placed by a third party. It has since been removed with no listing for any Palestinian entity. Quote, we apologize for the errant listing. We do not produce the country listings for NBA.com. And as soon as we became aware of it, the site was updated. So why is the NBA so afraid of Israel? I understand China, right? They have billions of fans. And I know that is another sensitive topic that players aren't really supposed to speak about. But in the case of Israel, it's hard to fathom how it could have that much financial impact, which is what one would sort of think until, that is, you dig deeper. From Tel Aviv to Tokyo, how Israeli entertainment tech is powering global sports. When the world tunes in to watch the Olympics, the Super Bowl, or even the Hall of Fame induction ceremony in Cooperstown, most viewers don't realize some of the groundbreaking technology behind the scenes comes from a small but mighty innovation hub, Israel. The tech is already in use by the NBA, La Liga, Bundesliga, UFC, and even NBC Sports for Olympic coverage. Israeli companies like RAD and Saragon networks provide high-capacity wireless backhaul and low-latency transmission critical for delivering 4K and 8K video, VR experiences, and real-time analytics to global audiences. Telco-grade Israeli innovations have helped build temporary 5G networks for event venues, enable live drone footage feeds, support AR/VR broadcast overlays via edge computing, deliver seamless streaming to millions worldwide. So basically, when you watch the NBA and apparently most other sports programming, Israel is watching you.
Did you have cell phones? You have cell phones here? No. You're holding a piece of Israel right there. You know that?
Yeah, no risk in that at all. They wouldn't do anything violent or nefarious with that technology, would they? No. NBA legend Stephen Curry also has investments in Israeli tech firms. His venture firm Penny Jar Capital is under fire for investing millions of dollars in Zaffron Security and Upwind, cybersecurity startups founded by veterans of elite Israeli military intelligence units like Unit 8200. Zaffron CEO Sanaz Yashar served 15 years in Unit 8200, Israel's signal intelligence arm, during periods that included major assaults on Gaza. That is not ideal, I would say. And Upwind's founders, including Amiram Sashar, met in the military's Mamran unit, which develops military software, and the company has employed multiple Unit 8200 veterans. But hey, it's just business, right? What's the big deal? Speaking of which, 5 NBA owners, franchise owners, also have direct ties to the state of Israel. Starting at the very top, Miriam Adelson, who I think we've all heard of at this point, right? The super donor to Donald Trump, owns the Dallas Mavericks. And she is the primary funder of all of these pro-Israel organizations like IAC, ZOA, which is the Zionist Organization of America, and Birthright, the owner of a major Israeli publication called Israel Hayom. Steve Ballmer of the LA Clippers is a significant donor to the Jewish National Fund and has characterized Microsoft as a, quote, Israeli company. Dan Gilbert of the Cleveland Cavaliers has established major research clinics in Tel Aviv and has donated billions of dollars towards pro-Israel causes. Mickey Arison, owner of the Miami Heat, was actually born in Tel Aviv, and his father and his entire family has major financial roots in the Israeli banking and maritime sectors. And then finally, Joe Lacob of the Golden State Warriors is a significant supporter of pro-Israel organizations and also involved in the Abraham Accords. So literally billions of reasons why players wouldn't be allowed to voice their true opinions about the state of Israel. Back in 2021, and this was a few years before the October 7th attacks, Kyrie Irving tried to use his platform to bring attention to the issue of Israel and Palestine. Let's take a listen and see what happened to him.
Kyrie, I'm just curious. I think there are a lot of people in the United States specifically who are working to try to understand what's happening in Hamas, Gaza, Palestine, Israel right now. How are you consuming that information? What's your kind of suggestion to people who are looking to try to educate themselves, but in the West, oftentimes, especially on the specific conflict, it becomes difficult to find that information?
I think you just can't be afraid to say what you believe in. It's not about consuming information or trying to be right, politically correct. I think it's just about doing what God intends us all to do, and that's to stand on the good word of treating everyone with respect, compassion, and love. Everybody. For example, I want to generalize everybody into one group because that becomes so divisive. When you say everybody's acting like this, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm just saying, when you're paying attention to what's, or you're aware of what's going on, and you're conscious of what's going on in the world, and you feel it, then what are you going to do about it? Are you going to write about it? Are you going to tweet about it? Are you going to be out there with them? Are you going to protest? Are you going to plan and strategize for what we can do better as a community, meaning a community that stands with unity and liberation? Not just for one race or one religion, because they justify it on these means or these grounds. So much history to uncover, and most of it is just not told to us. And it's just disappointing and it's saddening when the truth can't be revealed to the children that are watching us, and they're just watching our world go up into war.
All he said there basically was, I care about all people, regardless of their religion, race, creed, etc., etc. And for that, he was crucified and called an anti-Semite. Kyrie Irving suspended for anti-Semitic social media posts. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver and the Nets said that Irving is, quote, currently unfit to be associated with the Brooklyn Nets. We were dismayed today when given an opportunity in a media session that Kyrie refused to unequivocally say that he has no anti-Semitic beliefs nor acknowledge specific hateful material in the film. This was not the first time he had the opportunity, but failed to clarify, the Nets said in a statement. Anyway, he ended up apologizing to Israel, the entire Jewish community, for all the pain and suffering he had supposedly caused just so he could play basketball again. And then a couple days ago, Spike Lee wore this outfit to the NBA All-Star Game. And again, people went crazy.
Spike Lee should be banned from every basketball game for the rest of his life. The fact that Spike Lee would protest the fact that an Israeli-born player made it to the All-Star game, the player's not political. The player's just playing basketball.
Playing ball.
There's no place for this. Politics should not be involved in sports, which is why I don't want to get too involved in it. But the fact that the NBA allowed that to happen, and I'm sure at some level made this Israeli-born player feel a certain way when all he wants to do is play basketball. And now we're making political statements from a fan, not a player. If a player wants to do it, that's a player's prerogative. It's their game, not our game. But for the NBA to open up their doors and front row service to a despicable human being and allow him to make this Israeli-born player feel bad, he shouldn't be allowed in Madison Square Garden. He shouldn't be allowed in another NBA arena for a long time.
Oh no, you hurt my feelings by the way you dress. You should be banned from Madison Square Garden. Like, regardless of where you stand on this issue, it's just an absurd opinion to have, I would say. Let's hear more from Craig.
You now have a Jewish guy playing an all-star.
How about that?
He'll play on the world team off the bench.
Oh,
yeah, like legit from Israel.
Yo, I'm getting that jersey. Remember how you guys didn't get me a birthday present? Bang. I'll take a jersey from that guy. You give me a Jewish all-star jersey, I'm in.
He has had he's averaged like 25 points a game.
Because that's what my people do. We invented basketball. Forgot about that.
Really? Is that true? Let's see. The history of basketball, how the YMCA invented the game that changed the world. Discover the history of basketball in the YMCA, where Dr. James Naismith invented a game that became a global phenomenon. And the YMCA, I believe, is a Christian organization, is it not? So I have honestly no idea what he's talking about there. Anyway, people might ask, who cares about the NBA? It's just entertainment. It's just sports. But that's precisely the reason. These are the kinds of cultural spaces that propagandists seek to control, to make it radioactive to exist within these institutions if you decide to speak the truth. And now is the time to reverse these incentives, because I believe that actions follow incentives, right? It's a little bit cynical to think in this way, but it's kind of how it works. If there is public backlash against something that's greater than the flow of money coming from the other direction, that's when behaviors change. And that is something they are deeply afraid of. That is it for me today. Let me
I believe this is one of your first interviews since all of this document dump. So thank you so much. It's great to see you. How do you feel about Lex Wexner getting this, billionaire treatment?
Great to see you.
Yeah, well, nice to see you all too, and thanks for having me. Yeah, so it's really not, it should be pretty telling to everyone that he had Congress come to him instead of having to go to Congress. Exactly how Leslie Wexner operates. He's the richest man in Ohio. As I've documented in my books and a series of articles, he's been linked to crimes that have been covered up by the Columbus Police Department, leaving murders, among other things, unsolved to allow him to continue to engage in the impunity that he has enjoyed pretty much his, ever since he began engaging in criminal activity, which, as far as I can tell, at least goes back to at some point in the early 1980s. Around the time he was, becoming a billionaire, which I believe was in 1985 or so. And I mean, honestly, Congress has said that they're going to release the deposition and videos of it and are making it like a big show, that there's been accountability because Wexner, who was named a co-conspirator, and they redacted that, that he's finally been interviewed in connection with his role in Jeffrey Epstein's network. I mean, it's just honestly bonkers. I think what we can anticipate to see in that video, if and when it is released, is a lot of softball questions, Wexner denying everything and then being like, yeah, okay, thanks for your time.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for flying out. I hope you had a nice lunch here at my mansion in Ohio, but I'm not going to Washington, D.C. anytime soon. Do you think that there will be any prosecutions? We've seen now a former PM in Norway arrested. We have Prince Andrew arrested in the UK. I think those are the only
He was released.
Oh, he was released? Okay.
He was released after 11 to 12 hours, I believe.
Okay. So,
yes.
But my question is, that's the only two. One of them's been released. Do you think we're going to see any other actual arrests in the United States, prosecutions?
Yeah, I don't anticipate Leslie Wexner being arrested at any point. He is far too powerful, and his money is everywhere. And honestly, he has extremely deep ties to numerous officials in the Israeli government through his philanthropies. He focused pretty much the bulk of the Wexner Foundation on training up prominent figures, first in the U.S. In the Jewish community in particular. And now those Wexner fellows, essentially run AIPAC. It has an extremely close relationship with AIPAC, obviously one of the most powerful lobbying groups in the United States. And the other side of his leadership training via his foundation has been with Israeli public officials who have, these relationships as a result of that with Wexner. And I doubt, given, AIPAC's influence, as well as, what you touched on earlier with Israel's role with Epstein, it just does not seem particularly likely in any capacity. And I would also refer to the fact that one of the things that will never be investigated is the role of Epstein and also Wexner in this scandal that was covered up in the mid 1990s under the Clinton administration that's remembered today as Chinagate, but was obviously a lot larger than that. It was a smuggling operation that utilized Southern Air Transport, which you'll remember as the CIA front that was used to smuggle drugs and weapons during the Iran-Contra era. After the Iran-Contra era, the Iran-Contra crowd utilized the same network again to facilitate Chinagate, and they used Southern Air Transport, which came into direct connection to be dominant in that same period of time, was dominated by Leslie Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein, and they had it relocated not that far from New Albany, Ohio, just to run their cargo, ostensibly for the limited, from the Rickenbacker Airport in Ohio to Hong Kong. And people like Ohio's Inspector General called it the Mayor Lansky route because he argued they were affiliated with the mob. And Columbus PD, just a few years prior, had produced a document linking Leslie Wexner to the mob and his network in the murder of the lawyer for the limited, Arthur Shapiro. And in that document, they detailed extensive ties of Wexner to organized crime affiliates. And as I noted in my book, citing Catherine Austin Fitts, she was at an event and overheard a government official say that Leslie Wexner was one of the main launderers for organized crime cash flows in the United States. And this is something, as I've detailed in my book, that Epstein was very involved with this network that involves organized crime and intelligence, specifically in allowing them to illicitly move funds and in money laundering. And so, arguably Epstein was a front for that for Leslie Wexner. And this is stuff that they absolutely will, they just can't touch with a 10-foot pole without massive reverberations, for the national security state of the U.S., which has been beholden to this, shadow government of sorts in which Epstein operated, but he was a middleman for it. He was not the head of it. And so until there's an investigation into the people behind Epstein, including Wexner, and justice there, I think most of what we're going to end up seeing is going to be superficial, and maybe more will be admitted or discovered in these Epstein files, but don't expect the government to necessarily do anything about it.
Right. Superficial is the right word, because it seems like, and we don't have the full tape, but Democrats just were like, what did you know? Nothing? Okay, that's fine. We're going to go talk to the cameras now. So they didn't actually come with details of why'd you kick people out for asking about this power of attorney? Why would he have more rights than you to your estate? How come he can buy islands and you just kind of don't know, which is what, you and I might come with a lot more homework and say, explain these things. And they let him get away with like, I just don't know. I don't know. So why do you, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say a lot of Wexner attempted to wash his hands of this years ago, saying that they disentangled themselves in 2007. And since then, it's now been shown that they were communicating a year after that. So now it's proven that he was lying. But basically, the excuse he gave is that Epstein embezzled money from the foundation, but they never showed any proof of that.
Right.
Money was moved around.
He's like, I'll never
but
get
there's
an
no
accounting.
evidence that Epstein embezzled it. Yeah. They never charged him. So if you want to believe the Wexners that Epstein embezzled $42 million, they were just like, okay, that's fine. Bye. Keep the 42 million.
Friend of the show, Derek Bros, just wrote a piece about Les Wexner's very bad week, because not only he had to testify in front of Congress, but also in the OSU sexual abuse scandal. And there's a whole hornet's nest there tied to, of course, his brands and OSU. I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Well, he's one of the main donors to OSU. I think their medical school is named after him. He's been on the board of overseers or trustees of OSU for a long time. I'm not sure of his specific connection to the sex scandal, but I think it's worth looking into, considering that not only do you have, for example, as we've just discussed, his connection to Jeffrey Epstein, but other executives that worked under L Brands for Wexner, including, I believe, the former head of Abercrombie and Fitch, have been charged with sex crimes against minors. So why is this a repeating pattern around Wexner money?
Right.
Such a good point.
Now, I'm very curious because I only in these files learned about Dennis Hirsch, who took over for Wexner. And he said, look, Dennis Hirsch had the same power of attorney, the same. Is that true? And do we know anything about continued involvement, or is there a credible story that like it ended with Epstein?
What do you mean ended with Epstein?
Like
what ended with
any
Epstein?
kind of, suspicion, any cloud of suspicion ended around Les Wexner when he sent Epstein packing in 2007.
You mean in 2007, Wexner stopped engaging in any and all potential criminal activity?
And so
Right.
that is his story, is I was never connected to any criminal activity. And then Dennis Hirsch comes in, and then there's no cloud of suspicion ever again. So I don't know much about Dennis Hirsch. He says in this deposition, in this statement, that Dennis Hirsch had the same power over my estate that Epstein always had once I replaced him. So what do you know about Dennis Hirsch, and is that true? And he's dead now.
I haven't actually followed Wexner's finances extensively beyond the connection with Epstein. So that ends around the time of Epstein's first arrest. And obviously from that point on, Epstein rebranded as a tech investor and got involved with people, a lot of the big tech people like Peter Thiel, and was moving money around for people like Leon Black and Bill Gates and what have you. So seemingly moved on from him in that period. But given, a lot of his activities earlier on from that period, which I have studied extensively, I don't really anticipate that a lot of Wexner's activities that are less than legal would have discontinued just because he replaced Epstein with someone else.
Right. All on the up and up now.
Yeah, it's all good. You've been reporting on the Epstein files for years, or Jeffrey Epstein specifically for years. What do you, since we haven't had a chance to talk with you since these files dropped and you haven't done any interviews about it, what is genuinely new to you in these files that you maybe didn't know before? What changes the story? And what's just like maybe repackaged material that you've known for a long time?
So, I haven't had a chance to, it's like millions of files, so I can't really speak to the whole dump and say, but it's definitely corroborated a lot of things that I've reported in the past. That's Israeli intelligence stuff. I've been working on a story on and off since 2023 that I'm actually about to release, but it was about this sheik who has now been noted as having been redacted by the DOJ, who was sending torture videos to Epstein. I was following that guy for a while, and then Drop Site published emails between them last fall, and now there's even more that are just extremely disturbing this time. So that really opens up that story even more, and I'm actually kind of glad that I ended up waiting a couple of years to publish it, just because it'll be more comprehensive now, because that's a story that really goes back to the Bush administration, and not a lot has been said about Epstein in his time at the Bush administration. Allegedly, the Sweetheart deal, received approval from higher ups in the Bush administration. According to Nick Bryant, it was either former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales or it was George W. Bush himself. And if you look at that particular relationship, it was going on in the Bush administration and may have had a role in the Bushes wanting, or Gonzales potentially wanting to keep the heat, or help keep the heat off of Jeffrey Epstein. But there's a lot of things, and it's hard to cover them all, because for a long time, it should have been pretty clear to people that have followed this case closely that there are a lot of different angles, because Epstein had a lot of interest and directed money to a lot of different avenues. So one example is transhumanism. Another is his interest in eugenics. These are reflected in the emails that have been released, his interest in cryptocurrency and stable coins and Bitcoin, things of that nature. Really any other angle you want to talk about from the period these emails cover is reflected in there. But what's interesting is that there aren't a lot of emails from the early 2000s when some of the stuff with the Bush administration that I'll be publishing a report on soon were going on, and it some of these new releases paint that in a more interesting light than maybe say before their release. So again, I think people are going to continue to find things, because there's 3 million files or so to dig through. But ultimately, what's going on in this case is you have Epstein fronting for a broader network. And so keeping the focus on Epstein, it's important, obviously, to understand what he was doing, but we have to understand too, and what I've endeavored to show is that he was fronting for a larger group that still very much have their claws over the U.S. government. And obviously the future of the U.S. and much more. And so we should pay attention to that and also not become so distracted by searching for things in the files that we, ignore the fact that, for example, Israel, who is very involved with Epstein and allegedly used contraband and blackmail to manipulate U.S. policy, has been trying for decades to get the U.S. to go to war with Iran on that behalf. That could very well happen. So let's not forget to pay attention to other things and be, fall into get distracted at a time when, the people that Epstein helped serve, among other groups, might be finally getting what they want at a major cost for American lives and money, and obviously other civilian lives, among other things. I guess there's a lot more I could say too, but ultimately, I think there's a lot more needs to be done in investigating Epstein's activities as it relates to finances. There's a lot of ties to various financial crises, efforts to short currencies around the world. He was a known Forex trader. He worked with a lot of currency traders and had connections to them. People like Jimmy Goldsmith, for example. And others that were referred to by the New York Times in the 90s as a cabal of, currency traders that were basically destroying whole economies. And pretty much everyone in that cabal has ties to the Rothschild banking dynasty, which Epstein in these recent files acknowledge he represents. But that's quite clear that was the case. If you read my book, Robert Maxwell openly fronted for them, among other interests. And so if we don't follow these threads, as I've been saying, away from Epstein and higher up, he was being puppeteered by people, and he was obviously of use to them. I think the narrative that Epstein was an idiot and all of this, maybe he didn't use good grammar in emails, but he was obviously sought out for his abilities in, illicit finance and, smuggling, among other things. So I think, it's important to keep all of that in mind if we actually want to understand what was going in here and have any meaningful pursuit of justice.
Yeah.
A lot of things you just said there, and I want to unpack. So, let's just talk about this. So Natalie wants to ask you about the Clintons, which we will, the upcoming depositions. We'll get there in a minute.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I want to follow up with you on the Sultan story, because you said you've been working on that since like 2023 on bin Sulayem, who now has stepped down. Big ties with that Epstein scandal, obviously in Dubai, and their friendship there. So maybe we could dive more deeply into that. And then I also wanted to, there's a lot I want to talk about here. So, and any kind of
one question.
I know, I'm just sorry. There's so many people firing questions here in our chat room as too. So take the Sultan stuff here. What do we know about this guy? How dirty was he, and what was he involved with Epstein? Maybe you can unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away because I would like the article to come out, because I like having my sources publicly available when I go out and publicly talk about stuff. But essentially, this was a guy that almost successfully took over every major port in the United States. And it was facilitated to the outrage of Congress by top people in the Bush administration, some of whom later engaged in the Epstein cover-up. And so if you've been following some of this recent reporting in the emails, of Epstein's relationship with this guy, they say the earliest they can date it to is 2006. There is photographic evidence it happened earlier, at the time that this group was lobbying these top Bush officials to sign off on this movement. It was really an acquisition of the existing port operator by Dubai Ports World, which is what bin Sulayem was managing. And intimately involved in this is a guy that I was initially following and was a source of my article initially, which is Andrew Farkas, who's long been known as Andrew Cuomo's money man. as it were. And a lot has come out about his relationship with Epstein as well, but he's been a frequent business partner of this guy and connected him with Trump, for example, because with a DP World affiliated real estate firm, Trump did a lot of his Dubai-based and UAE-based building, including on the Palm Islands, which this guy ultimately controlled. And it gets crazier than that, if you can believe it. For example, Farkas has intimate ties to the missing HUD money that Catherine Austin Fitts has talked about at length for decades. It's pretty much provable that he was involved in siphoning a lot of it off, and then gets intimately involved with this particular network, including Epstein, who was a known money launderer for the Iran-Contra crowd, and this, shadow government of sorts. And then, as we know from the later releases, these were they were very involved with Epstein's activities at the Virgin Islands. The Sheik helped him purchase his island when he normally wouldn't have been able to. This team of him and Farkas intimately involved in USVI stuff, even beyond Epstein, co-owned a marina with Epstein that he needed to control in order to traffic girls to and from his island. And also, as I'll be reporting, a very disturbing proprietary telecom system that wouldn't have been accessible to anyone but them. So there's a lot of very disturbing things going on there. And I would add, too, that Andrew Farkas was listed as a reference by Jeffrey Epstein for one of his USVI companies, along with Jess Staley, which was apparently the jumping off point to investigate Jess Staley as part of this now settled court case between the USVI and JP Morgan. But if they went after Jess Staley for that, why didn't they go after Farkas when he was, listed in the same spot?
Yeah.
And I would argue it's because he is way too close. Farkas is way too close to top very high ranking figures in the Trump administration that are intimately involved in Middle Eastern affairs.
Right. Jeez.
Maybe you can unpack that piece a little bit more, the Middle Eastern affairs piece, as we barrel towards war with Iran, probably on March 1st, according to sources we've been speaking to. Jared Kushner buying up, Gaza, and then the Israeli piece. I know people, and I want you to speak for yourself, people have conflated, what you have said about Israel and the Mossad connections and CIA, and people like Whitney Webb says he's a Mossad agent, and you have to come out and correct people on that. So now that we hear about the Israeli connections in the apartment, the security system, and all of that, what can you say about the Middle Eastern Israeli connections with Epstein now?
And that are still inside the Trump White House that you just said. That's fascinating.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. So, regarding Andrew Farkas, the main connection, the closest connection there, he's obviously close with Trump himself, but also he's very intimately involved with the Kushner family. And a lot of the money behind Kushner family real estate deals actually traces back to Andrew Farkas, not the Kushners themselves. So people have argued that Kushner has an outsized influence on the Trump administration. So if true, I doubt any meaningful pursuit of Andrew Farkas would happen, even though he was involved in the infrastructure for the trafficking itself, among other things. And as far as Epstein's role to the Middle East in general, so it depends on what Middle Eastern country you're talking about. There's obviously the UAE ties and his involvement with Saudi Arabia, specifically Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince. He was involved in advising their sovereign wealth funds, apparently of both countries. His ties to the Saudis allegedly go back to the 1980s or so. If you may remember, he was found one of his residents that was raided, because not all of them were, contained an Austrian passport that had a lot of stamps for Saudi Arabia and listed Saudi Arabia as an address. Actually, this ties in kind of to the Prince Andrew story a little bit, because in this period of time, Epstein was allegedly the mentee of an arms dealer named Douglas Leese, who was leading the representation of the UK's BAE Systems in creating, which would later win the Al Yamaha deal, which is the basis for UK-Saudi military relationship. And it was a hugely significant arms deal for Britain and BAE Systems. And actually, Prince Andrew, in that role as a trade representative, would later step in to prevent investigating the legality of aspects of that deal, and was also a big, I guess, salesperson globally for weapons for BAE Systems, particularly, which again is significant in that it ties back directly to, Epstein's own mentor in arms smuggling. And bin Salman himself, when he first came out, it was a big charm offensive, right? But then he started promoting like this post-oil vision for Saudi Arabia, and a lot of the things he was promoting openly involved things that were funded by Epstein. You may remember, for example, he gave Sophia the robot citizenship, and that robot was funded with Epstein money in part. And the people involved there did that. So, and they've reported, since 2019, but I think the photographs are now available, that Epstein had pictures with prominent people from, the Gulf countries, including Mohammed bin Salman, including Emirati sheiks. And another thing to note there, as far as the UAE ties go, is that Epstein had a relationship with the bank BCCI in the 1980s, and potentially up until it collapsed with 1991, which was very important to this network in which he operated. And BCCI was investigated to an extent, not as fully as I would have liked, by the U.S. Senate. And there's a U.S. Senate report on BCCI you can read. And if you go to the end and sort of the appendix, they leave as an uninvestigated lead the fact that this bank, which was basically a CIA shadow bank, was running a sex trafficking operation very similar in terms of how it functioned to what Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were doing. But in the Senate report itself, it says that these mainly girls, many of them were prepubescent girls, were being basically pimped out to Emirati sheiks, and some of them would return with extreme bodily injuries from the encounter. Please go read that yourself, because these are family lines, the way this stuff operates in the UAE. So it's very possible that this sheik that Epstein got involved with later is like the son of, or maybe even one of the people that engaged in that kind of activity with BCCI. It was never investigated. So again, this stuff needs to be very properly investigated, and there's been a pattern of cover-up for a long time. Who covered up BCCI in 1991? It was then Attorney General William Barr, who came back in the first Trump administration when Epstein was offed.
Yeah.
Covering stuff up again.
Right. Okay, where should we go? So
we can get into Israel now if you want. Sorry,
well,
I just felt like
yeah,
what people know about
but that's
Israel
a tangled
time and
web.
the other stuff.
That is important. I think that's not unrelated, because this drop site news revelation that Israel was, running security for the apartment that Epstein was in, and Ehud Barak was there. It tells us unequivocally that there are foreign governments that have intelligence that our government does not. So we would never see things in our own justice.gov/Epstein, things that may be in the hands of Israel or Iran. Even Iran is saying, we have some evidence of U.S. corruption too. We don't know what to make of that. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, if Israel has stuff, they're obviously not going to share it, but they have a history of doing this stuff, even to their own operatives. So as an example, like Robert Maxwell, he was filmed and Israel filmed him having sex with, a variety of women when he was in Israel domestically visiting for various purposes while he was working for Israeli intelligence. They kept files on their own. So if they do that to their own, I think the Epstein case shows that they definitely do that to other people as well. As I've noted in my work, this type of behavior in which Epstein engaged in is not anomalous. And a lot of governments have done this for a long time, particularly this network, which Epstein was involved in, which again, I've argued for a long time is transnational in scope, but involves, probably most closely the US, Israel, and then former Soviet bloc countries, as well as Russia. And a lot of that is thanks to people like Robert Maxwell and the people that he worked with. To sort of tether that all together, if you will. But ultimately, the goal was to globalize organized crime. I argue it's at this point defined itself into a cartel, and they're really calling the shots, as it were, with a lot of this stuff. So one of the ways that they've done that historically is through recording people and compromising positions. So obviously, I can refer you to my books because I unpack a lot of people in this network going back to the 1940s, engaging in that type of activity. But another thing I argue is that Epstein, the type of sex blackmail activity he was engaging in was no longer needed to blackmail people. You can do all of that stuff digitally now, and I think it's no coincidence that Epstein told Ehud Barak to check out Palantir, which I argue in my book is really you don't need an Epstein blackmail style operation if you have Palantir operating. And there's a straight line, as I've noted in other past articles, from the Promise software scandal, which involved Israel, the CIA, this exact network, including Robert Maxwell, among other figures that pop up repeatedly in the story, all the way through Palantir's creation as a rebranding of the Bush era total information awareness.
How dirty is Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, and their connections with Epstein in all of this?
So I'm obviously no friend of Peter Thiel. I've been very critical of him for some time. Back in 2019, I reported about his co-investment with Jeffrey Epstein in Carbine, previously Reporty, which was headed up by Ehud Barak, and he chaired the board, but they have since rebranded after the initial Epstein story. But that has not stopped them from taking over a litany of U.S. 911 emergency call systems, which they now control, and they're run by IDF people. Even though they put a few token Americans on their board, it's still an IDF project, arguably a front company if you look at the other types of companies that Ehud Barak was creating with Israeli intelligence veterans in the same period that he created Reporty, now Carbine. Peter Thiel, now we have over the past year, fresh documentation showing Thiel and Epstein's direct involvement in making those investments happen. But Carbine is a direct way to create this type of surveillance system in which Palantir also excels. It no longer says this on its website, but when I reported on them, they had a functionality on their program where if you're calling 911 within a district controlled by this company, they can harvest any and all data off of your smartphone if you use one, and basically create a pre-crime system determining if you or someone near you will call 911 and commit a crime at some point in the future. And again, Palantir is built around and was always envisioned to have the same pre-crime functionality, and has developed obvious and very clear ties to the state of Israel, potentially given this new audio release that may have been forged by Epstein himself, which is certainly of great concern. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. But Peter Thiel has been asked about his relationship with Epstein several times. He is a liar. And a lot of these people, I should point out, that have denied their closeness to Epstein, including figures in big tech like Elon Musk or Ehud Barak himself, or really any of these people, or Wexner, who we started with, they deny, and then proof comes out, even though what's been released is estimated to be 2% of all of what the U.S. government has on Epstein, 2%. And we know how many of these people are liars. Why are we believing them at their depositions when they're asked these softball questions and they're just like, I didn't know anything bad was happening? Why are we believing them? It's crazy. So sorry, I got a little off track there.
Well, that's why I'm not looking forward to the Clintons' deposition, because how hard is it to just play dumb? That's what politicians do.
They're great at it.
That's what to expect. There's even an email in Epstein's like, oh, I have to give $1 million to the Clintons. Okay, I'll do it. What is this for again? He doesn't even know, right? And Hillary Clinton is out front saying, no, there's a lot of people involved. So can you discuss what you expect from the Clintons and, what we know about the Clintons that is not being discussed by the media?
Yeah, so I think we can expect similar stuff to what Wexner did with the Clinton deposition. I doubt it will go too deep. Again, and I think, as has been the media coverage of Clinton this entire time, it will only focus on Clinton after he left the office of U.S. president It will not focus on anything before then, even though Jeffrey Epstein went to the Clinton White House 17 times and maybe more, because there is also the case where a lot of Clinton White House visitor logs have obviously fake names on them to cover up the identities of the people who were coming and going. I'm sorry, but 15 visits to the Clinton White House by Donald Duck, I don't really think that was Donald Duck in the same period, you know? So it could potentially be more. No, I mean, that's literally a real thing. So it could potentially be more, but that's 17 confirmed visits we know about. Every time he went, he had a different woman on his arm. And they were of age, though. I should point that out. But, you know, this is what Epstein learned from his weapons dealer friends in the 1980s. People like Adnan Khashoggi, for example, who on his yacht would have a harem of women, it was called, basically butter up top corporate CEOs and government officials so that he could, you know, grease the wheels for his arms deals and his business. Epstein was really no different, just he was running more businesses than arguably Khashoggi was for a different set of employers, and some of the same employers as well when you count Israeli intelligence and the CIA in the mix. So again, there's going to be no scrutiny of these 1990s ties or these visits. A big reason why is the man that Epstein was meeting most of those times, Mark Middleton, because Mark Middleton was central to this aforementioned Chinagate scandal involving Southern Air Transport. He, when he was questioned in his role in Chinagate, pled the fifth 22 times. And then Clinton left office, 9/11 happened, and no one ever investigated Chinagate again. Even though it was basically well, I would argue one of the reasons for that is that it intimately, even though it's called Chinagate, it intimately involved Israel, basically selling sensitive U.S. military technology using this Iran-Contra network to the Chinese military. Obviously, an outrageous scandal for U.S. national security, but that shows you how influential this network is, and how, you know, a lot of stuff about China, let's give up all our rights for a Chinese arms race with AI is a complete bullcrap narrative, among other things. But basically, Mark Middleton is, you know, we know that Epstein it ended up dead in a prison cell. We know Jean-Luc Brunel ended up dead in a prison cell. The same year that Jean-Luc Brunel died in a prison cell, Mark Middleton died extremely suspiciously, even for other members of the Clinton kill list, as it's called. He allegedly wrapped around his neck an extension cord, hung himself, and then managed to shoot himself with a shotgun in the chest that was discovered 30 feet away, even though investigators initially said there was no weapon at the scene. And then immediately after, a judge sealed all photographic and other evidence of the crime so it would never be released to stop the spread of harmful conspiracy theories.
Right. A gun that's 30
feet away. You ask the Clintons about Mark Middleton, you will see how insane this all is, and they will not go there, because obviously if they did, it would probably implicate Leslie Wexner, as well as a lot of other people in this network that have sold out U.S. national security, you know, to ostensible adversaries for decades.
What
With
about
Israel's direct involvement, our supposed greatest ally. And one of the reasons this was happening is that arguably the most influential billionaire manipulating Israel's security complex apparatus in that period was a billionaire named Shaul Eisenberg that had a lot of ties to the Chinese government, and it brokered their ties to Israel's national security state in the late 70s, and helped bring Robert Maxwell, among other people, to Mossad. He was a major operator. And so, you know, there's no real scrutiny of that relationship. But I would argue this goes even further. This goes to something that Samuel Pisar, Robert Maxwell's longtime confidant and lawyer, and a co-conspirator in some of these things I'm talking about, openly told Congress in the early 70s that what was happening was the end of the relevance of the nation state and the rise of what he called the trans-ideological corporation, where multinational Western corporations were getting in business with state-owned corporations in China and Russia, the communist bloc, basically, and we're building a network, an economic network that would supersede the national governments around the world and would basically take over the world. And he was asked by Congress if this was bad, and he was like, not really. And he said this in the early 70s. And he, along with people like the heads of IBM, people from PepsiCo, people from some of the biggest corporations in the United States openly created committees to make this happen.
Gosh.
And he probably had intelligence ties. He represented Steve Jobs for Apple, and Steve Jobs was like, I don't know if he works for the CIA or the KGB. Probably both, because if you look at Robert Maxwell, you know, he was definitely involved with the KGB among other groups. He worked with KGB officers to spirit gold out of the Soviet Union, and a lot of these guys were involved in capital flight from Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. They funneled a lot of it to Israel, where they helped get and install Russian mobsters like Simeon Mogilevich, get them Israeli passports so they could penetrate the U.S. financial system. And our current president had involvement with some of those characters through his real estate deals and helped them launder money. So I don't really think we're going to see meaningful prosecution of these groups with the current crowd that's in charge.
Before we move
They've been on the take.
Before we move on from the Clintons, the Clinton Foundation stands out to me as a major question, something to focus on. Do you think any and the Epstein's ties to the Clinton Foundation and how it was used, whether it was for sex trafficking operations around the world, medicine, et cetera? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so the Clinton Foundation, I would argue, was largely set up. Major aspects of it were provably set up by Epstein. That's particularly true for the Clinton Health Access Initiative, and a lot of its work in Africa with AIDS, which obviously coincides with a lot of vaccination policy. And at the same time that Clinton set up his foundation, Bill Gates set up his foundation. They collaborate together on those things. And Epstein has also obviously had an interest in these types of networks as well, for health, they say. But obviously, in the COVID era, we became a lot more skeptical of those types of quote unquote philanthropies. And obviously Bill Gates, as well as Epstein himself, as particularly revealed by some of these new releases, but it was known before, have an outsized interest in eugenics and also transhumanism, which is the modern rebranding of eugenics. Even some of the people that used to run the British Eugenics Society, like Julian Huxley, authored texts in the mid 20th century talking about how transhumanism was the future of eugenics, and this is how they'd sell it to a new generation. These people are intimately involved with a lot of this stuff. And Epstein was intimately involved in those aspects, but we have to go back to Epstein being intimately involved also in illicit cash flows, which the Clintons absolutely love and have loved for a long time, ever since Clinton was governor of Arkansas through the presidency and after. And so, Clinton Foundation has obviously been dogged by what were once rumors, but thanks to WikiLeaks became, proven that it was basically a pay-to-play scam, and that they were taking money and then returning political favors when Hillary Clinton was, Secretary of State, or they thought she might even be president, right? And then after, she lost to Trump in 2016, it dried up essentially. But also, in addition to the other philanthropies, you have the Clinton Global Initiative, which was allegedly Epstein's idea. According to his defense lawyers, he was part of the core team that developed the concept for the Clinton Global Initiative, which is kind of like a Clinton brokered Davos, World Economic Forum style meeting. And they passed money around to Ghislaine Maxwell's Terramar, for example, among other things. And so Epstein was obviously very sought out in the not-profit world, arguably because he was very good at tax shelters, and a lot of these billionaires want to get tax write-offs or not have to pay money in tax. And so setting up these philanthropies the right way, when Epstein's background, going back to his time at Bear Stearns, was in tax evasion, obviously I think that points to why they were so interested in having him be involved in setting up their nonprofits. And there's also the fact that you had Epstein, I think it was Bill Gates, wanted to talk to Epstein about getting a Nobel Prize, apparently because he had influence over the Nobel Prize Committee. So, it went even beyond nonprofits. And so a lot of this world that the public has been shown about these do-gooder nonprofits and these do-gooder philanthropists, it's, Epstein was an expert in money laundering. He also became an expert in reputation laundering for these billionaires, most of which are criminals and some of whom are provably connected to organized crime.
When I was just leaving CBS in about 2010, 2011, I was asked to pitch a panel to the Clinton Global Initiative as a tech expert because I had been at CNET and CBS as a tech reporter. And I pitched something. I had just read Jaron Lanier about like fighting your addiction to social media. And I pitched something about not being addicted to social media. And they're like, nope, get out. They didn't want that. We want them to be addicted to social media. We are trying to entrap them. So goodbye. So I never got asked to speak, thankfully. That's just a little anecdote I thought you'd enjoy. Okay.
That is interesting.
Yeah. Glad
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a?
Go ahead, Philip.
So yeah, so I'm like listening to all these ties and then just thinking, you know, like with Kash Patel coming out, like basically saying Epstein trafficked to no one. It's very clear that the people involved in this, the power behind it, want the fall guy to be Epstein, and nobody's buying it. So is there somebody else of equal level that they can turn and point to? Who's going to be the next fall guy? They can be actually, this guy is really important in this. Somebody has to take the fall. And since Epstein can't do it because that's not working, like, is there somebody else that they can kind of like point it at him? And could it be Les Wexner, or is he still too powerful? Or is it just they just have to stick with the whole Epstein traffic to no one?
Yeah, I think Wexner's way too powerful. I think the risk of trying to go after someone at the same level of Epstein is that they might talk. Right. So like Jean-Luc Brunel was apparently, sorry, my glasses keep being super wonky, was in talks with to speak to U.S. prosecutors. And then he about Epstein and then disappeared. And then he ends up dead in a jail cell. You know, people that have information that could potentially incriminate beyond the spectrum they want to keep the public focused on, you know, that's threatening. And so if someone realizes they're becoming the fall guy, they may try and squeal, or they may try point the finger at someone else. That opens up a whole nother level of risk. And they have been building, you know, ever since Epstein died in 2019, this narrative that he was the lone baddie, and thank goodness he's dead. Just like Bill Gates said when he was interviewed about it a few years ago, well, he's dead now, so it doesn't matter. Right. And so I think they're going to keep running with that, honestly, as long as they possibly can, because I think otherwise it opens up, whether you go above or, you know, at the same level, varying degrees of risk are there. I mean, maybe they might try and go for someone that worked for Epstein, ones that aren't already protected by the sweetheart deal, the non-prosecution agreement. So you can forget about his executive assistant, Leslie Groff, that helped him plan a lot of this stuff. But maybe someone like his lawyers, but that should be protected by client lawyer privilege, right? So I don't know, maybe his brother, Mark Epstein, who's been kind of given a pass by a lot of the people that have interviewed him, given that he owned these buildings that were bugged by Israeli security, government security, and full of these trafficked girls, which, by the way, in terms of, you know, the amount of victims, I mean, we don't really know how many victims there were, but it was probably a lot given the volume of girls that were known to be in those apartments. And a lot of them were from places that don't get talked about a lot. So the most well-known victims that we know about are American. A lot of them were from Eastern Europe and Brazil. How many Brazilian and Eastern European
there's a
girls have come
9-year-old
forward?
referenced. Yeah, 9-year-old Brazilian, very cute or sexy or something like that.
Yeah, and some are from France. You know, I mean, this was obviously something that was global in scope, and there's really been no interest in disentangling the global aspects of even just the sex trafficking operation. But again,
and the
these are
past
people
tense that we're
involved with the
using,
mob.
though, suggests, I feel like it's still going on, and we don't, like, how could we pull the thread to know how it's still going on? Because like you said, Epstein was not the ringleader.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I think that a lot of this, at least with respect to blackmail, has moved to the digital realm because they compile profiles on you based of your data that are scraped from everything you do online. And that ends up in a Palantir database accessible to every single U.S. intelligence agency. There's 18 of them, and Palantir contracts with every single one. So on the other side of the blackmail angle, obviously Epstein didn't do this just for blackmail. I mean, he was a trafficker of many things. He was known for moving money from place to place, arms from place to place, and underage women, and also above age women that were young adults from place to place. So that is essentially the role he occupied. And so to understand again how in terms of this of the sex trafficking thing, obviously there was part of him that did it because he personally and sexually benefited from that. And there are emails following his conviction showing that he was still talking about women that were either from these places he had drawn upon before and engaged predatorially and criminally with them. So he may not have done it at the same scale he did it before, because some of the agencies, for example, that he had used once he became, by his own definition, radioactive after his first arrest, it was harder to publicly do business with Epstein. But he obviously had no problem finding women to traffic after then, and girls. So this is obviously something that people of that power level, if you want to call it that, are able to engage in if it is their proclivity. And obviously Epstein is not the only billionaire pervert in the United States. And so a lot of these people with access to money have obviously probably been able to access this because they've been doing it for decades and decades and decades and decades, and oftentimes with state protection because they get involved with intelligence agencies.
Our guest is Whitney Webb. We got some new video that just was released from the GOP oversight, claiming that Jeffrey Epstein specifically told him that he was a financial advisor to the Rothschilds and the family of the Rothschilds. So I want to play this and just get your take on this, Whitney.
I think it was his experience at an industrial level, like working for a big company like Bear Stearns, and then he had done personal work for the Rothschild family in France.
Personal wealth management, essentially?
I don't know.
We've seen some reports that he would present himself as a bounty hunter, that he would find people's missing money. Do you recall him saying anything like that?
No. Well, specifically, I talked to Ellie de Rothschild, and so I mentioned that earlier. So he represented their whole family. So there had been a whole bunch of people. I mean, most of them I never would have met, but I knew Ellie. I never met people, but there were people that called me that either insinuated or said they knew Jeffrey through a financial relationship. And so, I mean, they could have been actors, but at the time, a guy calls me up. I'll give you an example. It's just because I want you to understand this, because it's so confusing to me. He would say, like, I'm providing financial advice to the founders of Google. I'm providing financial advice to Jeff Bezos. I'm providing financial advice for the chief technologist at Google. And wow, I'm in good company because these are really smart guys with a lot of money. And you have to put yourself in the mindset of if my attorney said, he was qualified to argue in front of the Supreme Court, I'd believe him. I didn't say to call the Supreme Court and say, tell me, is he really an attorney or did he do this?
So, Whitney, as you talked
to
one of the biggest,
Lex Wexner,
as you mentioned, one of the biggest pieces of this is the financial ties, right? That still needs to be pulled apart. This is one of the biggest pieces of the Epstein story here. Did anything he say there surprise you at all? That was Les Wexner.
Well, actually, what he said is known. So, for example, as far as the Google co-founders, he managed Sergey Brin's family trusts and had very significant ties. I believe that came out during the JP Morgan case in the USVI, where Sergey Brin was actually subpoenaed, but it was settled and never went to court. So I guess that didn't go anywhere. But he was intimately involved with Sergey Brin in particular. And I know Ghislaine Maxwell had significant ties to Jeff Bezos, and the two of them cultivated lots of ties to the biggest names in big tech, Mark Zuckerberg, Reid Hoffman, Elon Musk, and Peter Thiel, among others. So that definitely rings true. And then, of course, Epstein claiming to represent the Rothschilds. That's obviously been made public in the emails as well. But I've argued in my book that, after Robert Maxwell's death in 1991, he pops up with Ghislaine in public for the first time and is, for all intents and purposes, the heir to Robert Maxwell's portfolio, probably with Israeli intelligence and probably with some of the illicit financial operations that Maxwell was engaged with at the time, and also his link with some of these organized crime networks I was talking about earlier. But why did Robert Maxwell come to the United States? He made this big entrance into the New York specifically a year or two before he died, and brought Ghislaine with him. And the reason he did that was specifically for the Rothschild banking family. And this is actually in a New York Times article that I reference in my book. I forget the exact title of the article, but it's like the Rothschilds mega dealer or something like that. But if you look it up on the archive, dealer is spelled wrong. They switched like the E and the A for some reason, probably to make it harder for you to find. But basically it says that the Rothschild banking dynasty, that at that time, which was, this article came out in the 1980s, they saw it as an error that they had never properly established a significant foothold on U.S. Wall Street. They had focused instead in Europe and other theaters. And so in the 1980s, they created a Rothschild entity on Wall Street, and they had it focus on mergers and acquisitions, specifically M&As. And to do so, they recorded, and to ensure their success, they recruited some corporate raiders that they had a close relationship with from Britain. One of them was Robert Maxwell, and the other one was Jimmy Goldsmith, who was a cousin to the Rothschilds, and also involved in the same organized crime intelligence linked nexus that Robert Maxwell was also tied to via the Claremont Club, which I discuss in my book. And Jimmy Goldsmith, actually, Epstein met a lot of his elite friends in New York, even though he's from there, but in the elite circle for the first time, actually at Jimmy Goldsmith's mansion in the area in the 1970s.
Wow.
Right after coming back from the United Kingdom on a backpacking trip, when he dropped out of college, which I would argue it all kind of goes back to that crowd. So Goldsmith and Maxwell basically come over and engage in these M&As fronting for the Rothschild family specifically. And then Epstein takes over the portfolio. And then we know now, actually it's been coming out, I think, since there were new releases of Epstein information, I think in the year after my book came out. So that would be 2023 or so, downstream of the USVI case, when it was settled, talking about his ties to the D. Rothschilds specifically, which is the French side of that banking dynasty. And if you have been paying attention, you would know for some time that Evelyn de Rothschild in particular, very, very close to Jeffrey Epstein. She actually wrote a letter to Bill Clinton in 1995 that he should meet Jeffrey Epstein and talk to him about currency stabilization. So this is something that's been going on for a long time, and he's been very involved with this particular family, which it goes without saying has extremely deep ties to the state of Israel for an extremely long period of his career. And again, I would argue that if any family is untouchable, that's one of them. And I doubt investigators would get very far in probing that family.
Right.
So, Whitney, will you hang with us for a few more minutes? We just got some more. Do you have to run? I just want to make sure that we're not.
I have to pick up my kids. So,
how much?
I do too, actually.
8 more minutes.
8 more minutes. Okay. So we'll just take a quick pause here. I want to ask you, there's some new Wexner video that just emerged. I want to get your take on that, and then we'll get you out of here so you can pick up your kids. So we'll just take a quick break,
Okay,
and then
sounds good.
we'll be right back.
Okay, before we do, we want to tell our friends about Cowboy Colostrum, because unlike other colostrum brands, Cowboy Colostrum is the first day whole colostrum experts in the world. I have to do my pickup. She has to pick up her kids in about 10 minutes. So I'll let Clayton. Whitney, it was great to see you. I'm running to my carpool, and Clayton will keep you for just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes.
All right, keep talking, and then we'll run out of time.
I'll shut up. I'm going. Goodbye.
All right, bye.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so we just
Bye-bye.
got some new video in, and they're starting to release pieces of this deposition, and it's starting to flow out. So I want to play this piece for you right now.
Did you ever spend time with Epstein and Donald Trump?
Together?
Yes.
to answer this question accurately. I would go to some of the Victoria's Secret fashion shows. Those are very important to the brand. At some of the fashion shows, Jeffrey was there and some Trump was there. And I remember because Trump would always introduce himself to me. And I always thought it was kind of odd that he was at the fashion show because he had nothing to do with fashion.
Did you ever spend time with Epstein?
So he finds it odd that Trump would go to a fashion show, and he had to go to these Victoria's Secret fashion shows, not because he wanted to see beautiful women in their underwear backstage, but because it was so important to the brand.
Yeah, I don't really buy that. Well, actually, I mean, it's possible he wasn't interested in the women. There's been rumors for a long time from local Ohio journalists that Wexner is not actually interested in women, and that his wife is kind of, a beard, as it were.
Interesting.
Which is very possible because in some of these files, there, I believe, allegations from one confidential human source alleging that Epstein and Wexner engaged in relations themselves. And that, has been alleged also, years prior by a local Ohio journalist that covered Wexner and Epstein for a very long time in the 1990s and early 2000s named Bob Fitrakis. Maybe he wasn't actually interested. But what Wexner is interested in, by his own admission, according to this New York Magazine interview that he gave in the 1980s, is accumulating more and more power and control. And the reason he says that in that article, it's so crazy, you have to go and read it, is because he considers himself demonically possessed by what he calls a debuk, which is the Yiddish term for a demonic possession. And he says he had it when he was a child, it left when he was a teen, and then when he was 40, it returned to him and makes him want to accumulate more and more power and become more and more powerful and grow his business. Given everything we know, that's just the icing on the cake, as it were.
Well, some of the other stuff that that maybe we haven't talked about here briefly before you have to go is, I want to just touch on the JD Vance connection here. He, as you reported, he did a fundraiser at Wexner's house to raise money.
When he was a low-ranking guy, and I would argue that's because Ohio people, every Ohio politician has to try and kneel at Wexner to get anywhere. And that would go for people running for Ohio governor right now, like Vivek Ramaswamy.
Also, Wexner's connections to AIPAC. And so this deep web with Israel, but I think you've reported over the years that Wexner funded or groomed a lot of the AIPAC people who then, of course, lobby.
Yeah, well, his foundation did, but he controls it. And the people he put in charge of it are have ties to this. It's a secret society, but a lot of the people in my book are openly part of it. It's called B'nai B'rith. It's the entity that gave birth to the Anti-Defamation League, which trains, the FBI and law enforcement people. But their board of overseers involved a lot of people that pop up in this scandal for different reasons. But people like Edmund Safra in the 1980s was there when Wexner was recruiting from there for his foundation. Edgar Bronfman was there, and allegedly the Bronfmans is part of why Epstein ended up leaving Bear Stearns in 1981. Max Fisher, who was Wexner considers him one of his business mentors, or main business mentors. You could argue he had about 3 or so, and a lot of these figures that he was really connected to. So he pulled from there, and they have a lot of influence. Roy Cohn, who I've written about extensively, he was a mentor to Donald Trump, but also a sex blackmailer, intimately involved with organized crime. He represented mob bosses like Tony Salerno, among others. He was involved in a litany of very shady stuff. He was also a big B'nai B'rith guy, and his father actually ran it, who was a judge in New York, the New York chapter, which is considered to be the most powerful. You could argue that the Wexner Foundation is kind of an extension of those power networks, and they've been basically, that foundation has intimate connections to most of the top people at AIPAC and a litany of high power Israeli public officials.
And we just confirmed the part of this deposition that just confirmed that Wexner just confirmed under oath, and the GOP has now released this video and he says under oath that he handed over total control, power of attorney, hundreds of millions of dollars, his entire empire essentially to Jeffrey Epstein because he was referred to him by the Rothschild. So basically the Rothschild's involvement here is the tie that like brought him into this.
Well, he said for a long time that he met Epstein through Robert Meister, who was an insurance executive. I think at the time he was at A&A in 1986 or 1987. Some sources say 1985. And that what Epstein became intimately involved in Wexner's inner circle around 1987 or so. And then in the early 90s obtained all this power of attorney. But if you recall what I said a few minutes ago about how Wexner views himself and where his ambitions for power come from, if he wants to become more powerful and wealthy, isn't it interesting that he would seek out someone like Jeffrey Epstein and give him complete power over his affairs to do just that for him?
Yeah, it's remarkable. And as you pointed out too, like this whole naive billionaire play that Wexner tries to pull off. I've even seen videos now that they're just releasing where his lawyer is reaching over to him, telling him and he says to him in his ear, if you answer any of these questions with more than 5 words, I'll fucking kill you. Those are his words. The lawyer leaning over and telling Les Wexner not to say anything. Like,
yeah.
And you got to play the naive old man billionaire. Like, I don't know. I'm just an old man. It's like the mob. It's an old mob trick, right?
Isn't Trump odd that he'd be into models? I don't know. I think it was pretty known by the time Victoria's Secret launched their fashion show in the late 90s that Trump was very into models and teamed up with elite models and John Casablancas to do stuff at the Plaza Hotel he owned, and met them through Studio 54 parties. Again, Roy Cohn was involved in that, and got connected with this world of supermodels. He married models. I mean, it's like, okay, well, how odd that Trump is into models.
Yeah, it's shocking. Whitney, you're incredible reporting as always. So Unlimited Hangout is your website, of course. You have new reporting coming out. When can people expect your big news?
Coffee. Follow me.